Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Place Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Myers in the chair. We will kick off through the agenda with apologies for absence. So received apologies from Councillor Whitcroft, who's been subbed by Councillor Rose. Councillor Healy is being subbed by Councillor Orrell, and Councillor Fenton subbed by Councillor Waller. With that all being said, I don't plan on croaking it from the chair, but I would like a vice chair just in case that should happen. I'm looking to the left here. And a seconder. Yeah, magic. And everybody's happy with that. Councillor Vassy, you take over in that event. Declarations of interest. Members, could I have any declarations of interest? None. Okay. Thank you, members. Public participation. We've got 5 registered speakers for this evening's meeting. The format is that you're allowed 3 minutes to speak, and I will take them in the order that I have them, have received them. So first, I'd like to go to Flick Williams, speaking remotely in relation to the Mayoral Development Zone. Flick, if you're there, you can begin.
Chair, elected members, I'm here today with a simple request that you recommend to executive that they extend the red line of the Mayoral Development Zone to include the station. Last autumn, I went to the Combined Authority to lobby the Mayor. He agreed to meet with me and told me very simply that there is no money to fix the inequitable access within the station that will continue unless something is done. York Central partners have opted to meet their planning condition for step-free access on the west side by installing lifts travelling up, not down to the subway. They have no further responsibility, box ticked, condition met. However, for anyone requiring step-free access, this results in a convoluted journey above, across and below ground, whereas ambulant people will be able to go up in the lift from York Central and continue their journey across the footbridge to all platforms and all facilities such as toilets, food outlets, retail and importantly the ticket office. In contrast, a wheelchair user or guide dog user would need to go up in the lift from York Central, travel a short distance across the footbridge, then take a new lift down to where Costa Coffee is currently located on platform 9. They would then need to travel much further along platform 9 or travel across and along to platform 5 to take either lift down to the 2 subways to continue their journey to access other platforms and facilities. A single lift going out, such as the proposed new one on platform 9, takes us straight back to the no step-free access into York Central. This proposed solution creates unnecessary wayfinding difficulties for blind and visually impaired people and those who are not familiar with the station. It puts an additional burden on station staff providing passenger assistance for disabled and older passengers. So it's a staffing efficiency issue as well as one of inequitable access for disabled people for whom stairs are not an option. Journeys across the station from east to west will also be more common than you might imagine. With York Central designed to be low car and with very limited blue badge parking, the bulk of the parking is provided in the new multi-storey car park on the east of the station. So in a nutshell, the Mayoral Development Zone comes with a pot of money, even if we don't yet know how much money exactly. So I implore you to recommend inclusion of the station within the red line of the MDZ to open the opportunity for money to be available to fix the unsatisfactory and inequitable access currently proposed. Should you choose not to do this, or perhaps not even to discuss it, it will undoubtedly be flagged later as yet another missed opportunity to give meaning to the promises of equity and fairness in regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you, Flick Williams. The remaining 4 speakers are all speaking in relation to water quality. I should say to Flick Williams, thank you for your contribution. Your comments will be noted, and I'm sure part of the considerations of members at the agenda item. So the remaining 4 speakers for water quality, I'll take them in the order they were received. Helen Poulsen, please. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I'm one of the founders of Use It or Lose It. We are a community organisation and our aim is to make the ooze nicer for everyone. Some of us like to swim in the ooze when conditions allow, but we have a problem. We don't know what's in it, whether we're talking about the nasty stuff or the people that like to be in or on it. I had hoped to bring the ooze with me to this meeting, so that in some small way the river could be present in the discussion, but I was told that this wasn't permitted, which, while I understand it, does strike me as somewhat ironic. We're very good at talking about the river. My question is, how do we bring the river itself and what it needs into conversations about its health? Just by way of illustrating the problem that I think we have, many of you may have seen a photo on Facebook of children and families enjoying the sandy beach on the Ouse back in the 60s or 70s. The comments below it said it all. You couldn't do that now. It's an open sewer. How times have changed. What would the Ouse say if they were here? What happened? What's changed? How have we let this go? We've lost confidence, connection. We've abandoned our imagination in relation to the river. Of course, the Ouse can be dangerous. Safety is enormously important, but the rivers are also places of fun, recreation, enjoyment, health, well-being for the people of York and people who come and visit us. Other cities are changing this conversation. The River Wye Charter is a great example, asks organisations to consider the river's interests when making decisions. Basel, you can commute to work in Basel. You buy a little thing to put your clothes in, off you go. It's become part of the city's identity after investment in cleaner water. Copenhagen has transformed its harbour from polluted industrial water into a place where thousands now swim and paddle safely. Paris, these cities have all been asking, what relationship do we want people to have with their river, especially critical now, times of global warming, climate change, recent heat waves. People want to be able to enjoy the water safely. Why not here? That's the question that I want to ask you. Let's imagine a different way of being with the river. In order to try and answer this question of what's in the water, we've started weekly testing for E. coli and now ammonia and phosphates at Blue Bridge. And we'll be part of the university's Aqua project, which begins in August. So we will ultimately have a better picture of what's in the water. I don't think this is our job, but we're going to crack on and do it anyway. Is that it? So, okay, quick suggestions. Can we have a news charter, please? Can we collaborate on a state of the Ouse report so that we know exactly what and who is in it, human and non-human? Can we build a better understanding of who uses it? And can we have a conversation about what it might mean for York to become a swimmable city? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Andrew Mortimer, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm one of the Lib Dem campaigners in Hull Road Ward, and I chair the Friends of Hull Road Park. And I want to talk today about Agenda Item 5, York's water network, and in particular about combined sewer outflows, referred to in Section 4 of the Yorkshire Water Submission. I'm pleased the committee will have the opportunity to discuss the impacts of the CSOs in York, but before you do, I'd like to highlight some of the issues that are not very clear from Annex 2. Firstly, the terminology used. The report explains that combined sewer network conveys both wastewater and surface water runoff. This doesn't sound too bad until you understand that wastewater is just a nice way of saying sewage, which includes toilet waste and cleaning chemicals for each of our homes. Across Yorkshire, the report tells us there are 2,200 CSOs. I've added them up, and in York Council area alone, there are nearly 80. The Yorkshire Water Submission doesn't try to quantify the impact of discharges from the CSOs in York. So let me try and help. From published data, we can see that in 2025 alone, CSOs in York discharged into our rivers and becks over 3,600 times, and for close to 20,000 hours. That's the equivalent of 2.25 years. But what no one can tell you is how much sewage by volume and other waste is discharged, as this data actually isn't published. So it could be running really slowly, or it could be absolutely gushing out. We've no idea. Historically, spill data is also difficult to obtain, as record for individual CSOs are overwritten each time there's a new spill. As chair of Friends of Hull Road Park, my main interest is in the Hull Road CSO. This discharges sewage into Oswaldwick Beck as it flows through Hull Road Park. And yes, that does mean we're dumping sewage into our public parks in York. Last year, the Hull Road CSO operated 6 times, a frequency that has increased over the last 3 years, even though Yorkshire Water are looking to reduce the discharges. On average, the Hull Road CSO discharges for around about 15 minutes. And I do have to say it is one of the smaller sites in York and is responsible for a relatively small amount of the overall volume of sewage being discharged into the public waterways. But it discharges into a very slow moving beck in the middle of a public park in what must be one of the worst located CSOs in York. I've spoken with Yorkshire Water many times to ask them to sort this out. I've been waiting for a substantive response to my latest letter to the Chief Exec for around about 10 weeks.
30 seconds.
I've asked if Yorkshire Water will help us celebrate the centenary of Hull Road Park, which takes place next year, by making a commitment to close the Hull Road CSO and stop this disgusting practice. I hope the committee agrees that this is something that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next is Robin Norton, please.
Thank you. I'm Robin Norton. I'm a regular rower on the Ouse. Those of us on and in the water are in the front line on water quality alongside nature. We've got brown tide marks on our boats. We get splashed with stinking water and we sometimes get ill. By 2030, water companies are to reduce sewage spills by 44% and cap outfalls at 18 per combined sewer outflow per year. In just the first 6 months of this year, to update Andrew's data, we had 14 CSOs in York already discharging well above this annual level. So one example, Fulford, just upstream of the University of York Boat Club, discharged raw sewage 346 times for an equivalent of 26.4 days solid. 6 more CSOs in York City Centre were not working for the equivalent of 5 or more days in the first half of 2026. So aside from not knowing the volume that Andrew's referred about, I actually don't believe that we see the full impact of the number of releases. Landing Lane, for example, did not report for 108 days in the last 6 months. Do we believe it only released raw sewage 5 times for a total of 1.6 days? It's not necessarily the case that there were 10% fewer spills in 2025 than 2020 because Yorkshire Water did a better job, which is what's been claimed in the annex. 2025 was a drought year with a hosepipe ban here. That said, dry weather does not stop sewage spills. I've not got the data for Yorkshire Water, but English water companies illegally discharged sewage more than 187,000 hours during dry weather in 2025. Yorkshire Water appear to be trying to shift blame to agriculture for water quality, but Oxford University told us in 2023 that human sewage has a disproportionate impact versus agricultural pollution. So there is a bit for farming to do, but Yorkshire Water have the majority of the issue in the centre of York. They need to work better with farmers, and a recent meeting run by Luke Charters saw a farming representative claim their priority was to get water off the land and into the sea as fast as possible, which I'm sure with York's problems with flooding, that's not a great idea. The £8.3 billion investment in the current asset management period that Yorkshire Water seems so proud of is entirely paid for out of incremental charges to water bill payers in Yorkshire, with rises planned every year for another 23 years, something Ofwat kindly decided on our behalf. The extra £3 billion of our money that Yorkshire Water are spending this AMP versus the previous one is not theirs to take credit for, even though they seem to be trying to do that. Water bill payers see around 1/3 of their bills go to paying interest on Yorkshire Water's debt. That's now £7.6 billion, and their dividends last year were £85.1 million. The budget bill payers have given Yorkshire Water should be spent steadily throughout the 5-year period. Is this being scrutinised? Some water companies have a habit of backloading that to reduce the interest payments on their debts, which we know is sizable. Yorkshire Water also needs to do a dramatically better job and be heavily scrutinised generally. They are very slippery. Let's be aware the CEO recently got a £660,000 payment beyond her salary that was not a bonus and stands to earn £2.1 million next year if she meets her targets. So why are Yorkshire Water suddenly trying to raid council tax revenues to protect the river from groundwater runoff after 30 years of monopoly? It sounds to me like they're trying to dodge a bullet. Calder Conservation Group, pardon me, recently stopped accepting funding from Yorkshire Water because they felt it compromised them and they weren't able to speak the truth about what was going on. And Yorkshire Water referenced, sometimes incorrectly, a number of relationships they're building with campaigners on the Ouse. We're here to scrutinise that monopoly and make it clean up our water. We're not here to be used by their PR machine. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Alistair Boxall, please.
Hello, I'm Alistair Boxall. I'm Professor of Environmental Science from the University of York. I'd like to thank the Chair and the committee members for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon. You've already heard about the Aqua project led by the University of York. What I'd like to do in this 3 minutes is just give you an overview of another project being run by York, which I think could be very helpful in your thinking and your work moving forwards. So this project is called ECOMIX. It's funded by the Natural Environment Research Council. It's been running for 3 years and 9 months, and it's been looking at chemical quality across Yorkshire's rivers. We've been monitoring 19 locations across the region. That includes locations on the Foss and Ouse, but also upstream in the Swale and the Wiske. It's involved sampling every 6 hours for a year, and it's providing, I think, a unique picture of chemical contamination in Yorkshire's rivers. Alongside that, we've been developing a computer model, and this computer model is able to look at chemical quality in rivers at daily resolution, at very fine spatial resolution, and comparison of the model with our experimental data and Environment Agency data suggests it works really well. We've been using the data and comparing it to toxicological data, and this is showing that many of the chemicals that we use in our everyday lives are of concern to Yorkshire's rivers and York's rivers. This includes flea treatments, stuff from the highways, stuff coming down the drain in wastewater. We're developing this data and the tool into a dashboard, which will be available by the autumn. This dashboard will allow users to identify for particular locations in the river network what the chemical threats are, what the risks are, and what that's doing in terms of biodiversity. And I think this provides a unique opportunity to for York to actually lead, I think, in terms of dealing with water quality issues in the UK. And I really would encourage the committee to engage with the project team and explore how we can be using these tools and the data moving forwards. I have brought some postcards along which have a little QR code. These link to a site where we had some of the data available already, and I'm happy to share these around, and you can perhaps take a look just to give you a feel for what's available from the project. So just put this there.
Thank you, Alistair. Okay, again, I'd like to thank people who've registered and come along to speak at this evening's meeting. So your comments will be taken into consideration when we get to that item. Agenda, thank you for the postcard as well. Agenda item 4 are the minutes, members, of the last meeting. You will have had a chance to review them. Could I ask if there's any points to correct, or are we happy that they're a correct record of the last meeting? Councillor Vassie.
Chair, yes, I just wanted to remind the meeting that in our May meeting of place scrutiny, the committee had agreed to invite Make It York and York Bid to attend the June meeting so that they could participate around the table to discuss the issue of parking charges, which was the key item at our last meeting. At that meeting, unfortunately, we heard that neither organisation had been invited, but you did advise us, Chair, that they would be invited to a subsequent meeting. So there was no reference to that in the minutes, but I was wondering if you could give us an update as to when Make It York and York Bid might be invited to participate in the discussion with us. on parking charges. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. The May meeting, the June meeting that we had on parking charges didn't deal with the citywide parking issue, dealt with the parking charge brought by the 3 community car parks that were affected by car parking increases. So as such, I don't think we invited them to that meeting on those grounds. But you're quite right, it is an item that we would like to hear at this committee, and as such we have been making overtures. We are still following up on inviting those organisations to come to this committee to discuss that item, and we can try to nail that down further tonight when we get to the work plan discussion at the end of the meeting. You're quite right to raise it. It's an important item, and I want to ensure that we do hear that item with those organisations.
Yes. I'm just particularly keen that we make sure that we're in pre-decision scrutiny on this, so that we time things correctly.
Yeah.
But thank you for what you said.
Yeah. Okay. We can deal with that again at work plan, but you absolutely have my assurance and Vice Chair Councillor Healy's commitment to making sure that happens.
Thank you.
Councillor Perrott.
Apologies, Chair, I'm doing this a little out of order. I wasn't here in time to declare an interest. So an organisation that I work for is mentioned on agenda item 5, but I don't have anything to declare beyond the fact that I work for them. I just wanted to make sure it's a matter of public record that I did declare this interest. It's already in my register of interests, but yeah, just for full transparency. Sorry, I'm very late getting to this and missed that item.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Perrott. So that's the water network health check agenda item. Okay. Are we happy with the minutes? I can just see nods. I'll sign those. That's great. Okay. So we have had a request to move the items around, which I am happy to oblige. And so with that, we will do the York Central Mayoral Development Zone item first. That's okay with members. Yeah, we're going to do that. So for this item, there's an updated agenda supplement that you would have been emailed through. There's printed copies if people need it. As a committee, we're asked to note the Combined Authorities paper on mayoral development zones and to seek such clarification in relation to the process to be followed as the committee considers appropriate. I would like to introduce Gary and it's James Farrer from the Combined Authority and Gary Taylor, the head of City Development at City of York Council. Would you like to introduce the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short because I do have to go, and really sorry, I do have to go at 6:15. Obviously I would usually spend, well, obviously not hours on these, but I have an appointment. It's my son's birthday actually, so apologies. So I will keep it short and take it as read. Just to note, this is our report, so it's not the Mayoral Authority's report. You're here as a guest to speak to the report and answer any questions accordingly. But the actual implementation of Mayoral Development Zone is a power held by the Mayoral Authority and will be implemented by the Mayoral Authority. Obviously, this is to seek your views to go to exec to then make a decision in terms of us as CYC in terms of whether we support that approach or whether we want amendments or if we don't support that approach. And fundamentally, mayoral development zones don't come with any specific powers, so they're not like the old kind of development corporations, and also the powers that mayors do have to put in place a development corporation. So they are pretty much just a badge, but potentially do come with funding. They are recognised nationally. They're recognised heavily by funders specifically. And bear in mind, we're in a delivery phase, which requires about 2.6 billion private funding, obviously a significant amount of government funding is a part of that. So what this does do is bring a very strong badge to the delivery phase, which will hopefully enable us to lever in the public-private funding. Just to answer the member of the public, Flick, earlier, in terms of from my professional advice, I would totally concur that the development zone should be a wider zone. Obviously, the actual boundary is set by the mayoral, but we will be obviously putting forward our proposals for in this discussion and the report to exec. But and also that we should be looking to address the failings of the train station in terms of accessibility, and also the opportunity for York Station to be a key hub to connect both York Central and also the city centre. So it's an absolute key part of the investment opportunity we want to bring and to drive and work with the Mayoral Authority and also Great British Rail, as it will be known. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. James, would you like to add anything?
Well, I'm going to say very little because I want to make sure we've got enough time for questions, given the back up exactly what Gary says. Yeah, this is about strategic positioning to maximise the potential to bring the investment into the city. And actually the boundary, which is one of the key issues, will be agreed jointly with the City of York and between the mayor. So we will absolutely collaborate and work together on that. But I'd rather leave as much time for questioning as possible, if that's okay, Councillor Mayor.
Perfect. Thank you both. So I will open it up to members for questions and comments. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. At risk of sounding flippant, I think this is fairly straightforward. We probably stand to gain from going with it. But I did have one thing that caught my eye in the paper was the 500k to sort of develop the zone and I guess manage it. And it almost felt like we need to spend 500k in order to spend this 10 million that already exists in other pots. I'm just after a sort of better justification for that £500,000. What exactly is that going to go on? And do we really need to spend that much?
For you, Chair. So that 500k is a pot that sits with the mayoral to allocate across all the proposed development zones. So there's 2 of a proposed development zones.
Yeah.
And obviously the 10 million is capital. We really struggle as a local authority with revenue to develop schemes. So we would welcome a pot of 500k to able to bid into, because you can't use capital to develop the scheme. So, for example, the station, if we were to wanting to develop that accessibility scheme in a master plan, that will require revenue funding that we haven't got as a local authority. So that will enable us to engage with the mayoral authority and bid and work collectively to hopefully draw down funding in order to do that revenue element before then you submit for any sort of capital works and such like. The amount we will spend will be dependent on the scheme proposal and what we're bidding for.
So, forgive me, Chair, is that a new staff member or staff members, or is it?
At this moment in time, it's just a fund, but it could be regen staff, planning requirements if we need specific planning skills.
Right, yeah.
It could be external consultants if we want to do a master plan. So anything that is the development of a scheme that would require revenue, which we don't, it's an area we really struggle with because of our revenue positioning. Capital is slightly easy, but obviously capital has a revenue implication, but it's that upfront work. And again, it will be very much dependent at any specific time in terms of our ask of the mayoral authority.
Thank you.
Cheers. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to some extent it's a supplementary of that. Just looking at like money funding available. So I noticed on page 70 it seems to refer that to 8 million of the 10 million being allocated to Scarborough already. Is that the case? And then there would only be 2 million to be divided between Selby and York. Is that accurate, or is it still all in the?
Yeah. So I think we need to look at this kind of slightly strategically. In many ways, that 500k is important because it's to identify what is the need. I would envisage across the Mayoral development zone, we will need a lot more than 10 million. So that's just an initial allocation from the combined authority looking at what can deliver when it can deliver. Actually, with regard to spending the 500,000, we'll be looking at national funding pots and such as there's a thing called the horrible name, but puffins, which are public financial institutions. So I would imagine to deliver on York Central and with Selby and Scarborough, 10 million will be a small amount compared to what we need to bring. And actually the focus will be spending the money to build the investable propositions to bring in the money that's needed to make it happen. So I understand your concern, but actually it's not about 10 million pounds. It's probably about 100 million pounds or more than that, and how we use that as leverage to bring that money in.
Okay, so it's a means to an end in to some extent. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. If this can improve the accessibility of the station, that's clearly a good thing. For some of us who've been around this York Central project for a long time, one of the things that's delayed things many times is working with all the different partners to get them in the right place at the right time. Can we be assured that adding another partner isn't going to add delays to the scheme? That in general, getting this money in obviously sounds good, but we need some sort of assurance that it won't delay things anymore.
I'll say something, then you can come in. The Mayoral Combined Authority are already a partner very much in this already. Most of the funding will likely via through the Mayoral. Obviously, we've got our own economic development zone in this funding, so partner relationships. I mean, we've got really strong partner relationships with the Mayoral Authority and all the partners now. I mean, fundamentally, regeneration and delivering really complex schemes is built on having those strong relationships, and it's only as good as the individual. So I wouldn't see that. I don't personally see this, professionally see this as a adding a different partner in that's going to go off in a different tangent, because we are working collectively already. If that helps. Yeah, I'll let Jim.
I think you said it perfectly, Gary. It was interesting. I spoke to central government today, and who've spoken to the York Central team, that spoke to City of York Council, and spoke to me today. And the message I got back was they've heard the same story 3 times. So they're getting exactly the same message with whoever they speak to. And I think that, I agree with you, it's taken quite a while to get to that place, but we're now absolutely clear. We've got a world-class vision for York Central. We're all bought into it. We're all right behind it. Actually, the question is, how do we get the money we need to make it happen and make sure that it is world-class? And that's the purpose of this.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Having been involved in this project for some decades, my question really is, how does this help deliver a scheme that benefits the city? Because there's vested interests in pulling this in all sorts of directions. And I can remember board meetings with, he was then Sir Peter Henley, obviously been elevated since then, and Stephen Kinsella from Homes England, in terms of how it would help the city in a very positive way, and avoid the pitfalls of some nearby zones that have appeared more in private eye. And the station was very much seen as it ought to be in, because the drive then was from the train company to have as much solar generated on the station, as well as we've discussed the accessibility, but having this sort of bit in the middle not connected did seem a missed opportunity, and it would be helpful to correct that.
Yeah, so And I'll just stress it is just a badge, and it's not just a badge, because the development zones are recognised specifically by funders. So we have a collective vision now as a city, and the key element of that it's threefold. Is this wonderful sort of connective public space and realm that not only just connects the space within it, also connects the communities to the city, back into the city, which is why the station is so important in terms of drawing in that additional investment. I do think the station being with the MDZ will help in terms of that discussion. I'm hopeful the station being the MDZ will help boost the conversation we've had in the last 15 months around that government hub. And hopefully, in terms of drawing in moral government, it's not just the west, it's also to the east. So obviously York being a key factor in terms of that. Obviously the MDZ will help in terms of that dialogue with government. The dialogue we need to have around the innovation hub, which isn't just an innovation in the widest sense, in terms of, which is also, it's really important in terms of those larger level innovations as a city, but also an innovation in terms of opportunity. We're a city with lots and lots of small businesses. In terms of how does that infrastructure go in that can help those businesses grow and support them and give them opportunities into some of the larger businesses. So again, all of this needs funding. So, and fundamentally, it won't be, because of the nature of this scheme, the cost of this scheme, the upfront investment needed, it will require, either government-backed funds, low-interest funds, as well as the private investment. What this absolutely isn't, as I stressed at the beginning, it's not a development corporation. This isn't about buying up swathes of land and selling land. And so it's like, we've got a model, we've got a procured partner through proper processes. So we're starting on the right footings in that respect. But it will help us accelerate that vision that we want for the city.
As a follow-up, Chair, if I can, in terms of the conversation that you've had today, James, there's an interest in moving government to the north, but now there's a sort of drive towards Manchester, as we are at the other end of the line, so to speak. There's no sign at this stage that this diminishes this project.
I think it would have been unfair for me to ask the civil servant to be able to answer that today. But I'd like to couch it in a slightly different way. The way I'm reading it, and this is not that I've spoken to Andy Burnham or the Prime Minister, much as I'd love to. This is just, I'm always glass half full in these things. To me, the number 10 of the North is a commitment from the Prime Minister that he wants more key decision makers not to be in London, in the north of England. And obviously he's putting a number 10 in Manchester. The way I take that is that is a green light to push even harder for the quality of people and the seniority of people that we have at the government hub that's going to come onto York Central. So rather than seeing it as a threat to the government hub on York Central, I think we should use it as an opportunity and saying this is a clear message that the Prime Minister wants more senior decision makers to be in the north, not in the south. And the best connected city in the whole of the north of England is the city of York. So to me, we should be making a really strong pitch on a positive aspiration rather than seeing it as a threat at this point.
Yep, that's good batting, James. I totally concur. Councillor Vassie.
Thank you, Chair. So you talk about accelerating the vision for the city. My concern here is that I'm still waiting to hear that vision properly set out. I don't want to see more delay, because I note that we're at a stage now in 2026 where Heidelberg was in 2005, when they were developing their railway goods yards. And by 2011, they'd already ensured that all the buildings on the entire site were built to Passive House standard. They had a tram network, they've got district heating across the entire site. I want to see all of that for our city. But all I see from this report, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially a device to change the word, the acronym MDC to MDZ, in order to unlock some concept of maybe having better access to funding, which I don't feel qualified to comment on, but if that's how it unlocks it, fair enough. But what there's not really yet here is an idea of what the vision is, who's going to make the decisions. Are they going to be made in York? Are they all going to be made by the mayor? How are people going to be engaged to make sure that we deliver something that I think most of us around the table would want to see, which I would characterize as the dream. I'd love to see a new York next to the existing York. I'm just a little concerned that we're just saying, yes, okay, there'll be money coming in and people will be encouraged to give us tens and hundreds of millions of pounds to make it happen. But to make what happen? So can you give us some assurance on that level?
Yeah, so I think I totally concur with you in terms of the train station. There isn't a vision for the train station that would say, you know, with that. But given it's the most connected train station in the country, that should be significantly elevated. And we need a vision, which includes the connectivity, but in my view, much more than that. In terms of, if you look at some major cities now, in terms of what they facilitate in terms of that 24/7 city and the connectivity. The actual York Central in itself, you know, that has an approved vision, that has planning. That obviously it'll be coming later in this year in terms of the phase 1 planning committee. So there is a physicality in the vision now, and you know that is to incredible design levels, and ready to go, subject to funding. So, and that is about the central business district, but with inclusive elements in terms of the opportunity around the innovation hub, in around the government space and office. We're having lots of conversations and dialogue with the mayoral, national government in around what that is in terms of bringing more than just employees there, but actually it performing something into the key policy hub for the country and what the opportunities could be in and around that. And then you've got, you know, these wonderful public spaces that flow into a wonderful public park, and then you've got a whole range of different housing types. And some of the key element, again, which we didn't mention, is we need to drive more affordable homes as a part of that. And whilst there'll be a planning element of that, we need to get Homes England funded in. So obviously a key unlocker of that is the designation of MDZ. So there is already a vision there, and we're we're blessed as actually to be in such an advanced stage in terms of the design development in that vision. Where it's then how we action that, make it happen, and there is a lot of work then to ensure that it is connected back into the city.
Can I just follow up? So when those plans came to the council, among the issues that were raised at the time were, for example, the lack of light rail or any form of station at the northern end of the site, so that people leaving the station could quickly get to the other end of the site and get off into all these new homes that would exist. The reason I'm saying the things I'm saying is to try and understand whether the money that we're talking about here might be used to unlock that kind of thing that wasn't bought into at the time, but many councillors on all sides wanted to see a more coherent public transport strategy. Are you saying that it's too late and what this money's for is to tweak what's already here? Or are you saying that there are further opportunities to make more of this site?
So this is nowhere near enough to take us to that step. And the other piece of work I'm commissioning is the movement and play strategy, which links to the city centre reimagining. So that is looking at public transport modes, cycling, walking citywide connectively, and also looking at the improvements we need to make to the city centre, so the two parts of the city work, the new and the old, really connectively. So that will look at what light rail such like opportunities there might be. We're at an early stages in terms of the Mayoral. So you know, more advanced mayoral authorities are getting significant funding for light rail and such like. So we're never too late, but the way in which York Central's designed, it's an easy bolt on, to be honest, and it creates a density that may make such more viable. So we will be exploring those. That's not the MDZ, that's the city.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry that I am going to have to go.
Yeah, I appreciate
it.
Thanks, Gary. So I can,
Thank you.
thank you, Gary. I'll ask a question of James with a preamble, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Rose. And we welcome Dave Atkinson, Director of Environment, to the table. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. So I was going to ask about the red line boundary and establishing that. There's some amazing buildings. My register of interest shows that I'm a co-founder of York Unlocked, which is an amazing festival once a year, opening up buildings that people might not necessarily get access to. We had some great national railway museums in last year's festival. This year, 3rd and 4th of October, that's the plug. We'll have lots more, but there are some incredible buildings, heritage buildings around there that could see themselves slide outside of a red line that you could be drawing up. And I would at this stage say that those buildings are, some of them are real jewels that I would love to see investment into for the city's benefit. And so we've heard about the station being involved and included in the red line. That seems to be a positive outcome, but there's also nearby railway heritage buildings. So I just wondered, in the paper it says that agreement in principle, then you'll get to discuss those red line boundaries for the zones. Have you got any more detail on how that might work?
Well, I would agree with everything you said, to be honest with you, Councillor Myers, and actually Councillor Waller, about the importance of making sure that whatever's developed is connected to what is the existing city, and that thinking. It's absolutely a conversation between ourselves and the City of York Council. So, you know, Gary and I have had a number of conversations around this, but we'll engage politically as well. But it's absolutely about understanding in a way you want to draw a red line which creates the opportunity for these different things. And then what you do is you don't just spread the jam thinly, you then segment it and saying, well, actually, there's a specific objective here to do that. There's a specific objective there to do that. So in many ways, what you do is you create your red line that works and brings in the assets that want to be included. Then when you're setting up the objectives of the Mayoral Development Zone, you are then specific, saying actually it's not there to do all things to all people. Actually, lots of York Central just needs to crack on now and get delivered. However, there are a number of specific challenges, opportunities that we want it to address. And actually, if one of those is some heritage buildings which are on one edge of York Central, that's fine. You just set that as an objective of the Mayoral Development Zone, so that's when it's meeting, that's what it's focused on, that's what it's discussing. What we don't want is to create a Mayoral Development Zone that tries to duplicate existing structures and existing governance and gets in the way of facilitating the delivery of what has been, as has been said a number of times, several generations in getting to here. What we want to do is the bits that are ready to go, let them get on and let them get delivered, and let's create a zone with the appropriate line that we all agree on, but then has some very clear objectives. That it's here to enable this, it's here to enable that, it's here to enable the other, and be very focused around what those things are.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, thank you. I'm supportive of Mayoral Development Zone. I think the kind of red line question, including the station and so on, is a sensible question. There isn't a definitive answer on. Welcome the conversation on that, and I agree that there's more that could be done with the York Central site. That if we find opportunities to improve things, it makes sense to leverage that where we can. Just coming back on a point Christian made around the MDZ versus MDC distinction, and my major concern, but not a concern per se with this plan, So mayoral development zones, they unlock some opportunities, and there's a little bit of strategic partnership stuff there, but it's not the same thing as a mayoral development corporation, which has all the extra powers and authority that comes with it. But MDCs have obviously caused problems for local authorities across the country. So, HS2 Hub in London, the Olympic Stadium, Tees Valley, they hit them, local authorities, twice. They hit them in terms of the upfront problems and costs, and then they hit them with revenue and spend implications later. And sometimes MDZs have led to NDCs. So my understanding is, and I'm not an expert on any of these sites, but the Northern Gateway MDC was Atom Valley MDZ. That there's a Brabazon, I don't know how to pronounce it, West Innovation Arc is currently an MDZ that's designed to become an MDC. And that process is the same whether there's an MDZ there or not. So it's kind of irrelevant that there's an MDZ here, because we could have one imposed on us as a local authority, hypothetically. But I guess I just want to get your assurances for why it's definitely an MDZ, why we shouldn't have any thoughts about the NDC side of things, and why that's where we are at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point, and the point you make is right. Mayoral development corporations are very complex. They're formal and very expensive as well. And so there's to create a mayoral development corporation, there's quite a long consultation and lead in process to do that. And typically you would do a mayoral development corporation where there were land assimilation issues. So where there was needs to bring plots of land together. Now that's been done on York Central. So in many ways, if you went back 10, 15 years, you might say we need a mayoral development corporation because you had some council land, some Network Rail land, some Home in England land, etc., etc. Actually, that core bit of putting a vehicle in place to assimilate the land, to be able to attract the private sector investment in there, to enable the scheme to happen, has been done. So there isn't the need for the mayoral development corporation at the moment in that same way. So that's why we're looking at the mayoral development zone around it. In many ways, what we will do is it comes down to, once we've created the red line and understood with what are the blockers within that we want the mayoral development zone to focus on. When you're looking at those blockers, you then say, okay, what is the blocker? What are the tools available to unlock that blocker? Now, I think it's unlikely we'll need a mayoral development corporation unless there are land assimilation issues, because most of the other things that you might want to do with it, you can do without it. So in reality, I think I'm not saying it's impossible that there will be one in the future, but your starting point is always, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? Let's understand the red line. Let's understand what is the responsibility of the mayoral development zone within that red line. And then for each of those things, let's understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. And once we get to the problem we're trying to solve, we then look at all the options that are available, say, right, what's the best way of solving it?
Thanks. Just, I guess, a quick follow-up on that is, I totally agree that with what we're looking at here, anything we would want to do with an MDC can be done with an MDZ with the consent of City of York Council. But in a hypothetical situation where you had a mayor and North Yorkshire, or you had, Homes England, all these other organisations that wanted to do things that City of York Council didn't feel was appropriate, an MDC is a way of doing that without, in a way that an MDZ couldn't do that. And that's not an accusation that this is the direction of travel, but I guess my point is less towards you in this paper, and it's more a commentary to senior officers and exec when they're looking at this, that whatever assurances and whatever safeguards we can put in place to protect against that, I think is absolutely critical, because we do need to be in a position where we're not losing the heart of our city and control over that space, particularly on planning matters. But again, that's not a criticism of the current authority and where we're at. It's just, yes, an MDC can unlock that with all the councils working together. It can also be used to fight against the council if they don't like what the council's doing.
Can I just respond to that, Chair? I think it's just an important point there is that the combined authority can't do a mayoral development corporation anywhere without the approval of the constituent authority where that site is based. So we could only do a mayoral development corporation in the City of York if City of York Council approved it, and similarly we could only do one in North Yorkshire if North Yorkshire approved it. We can't do it to you.
Is that correct, or is it just a majority of the 5 votes? I thought it was just a majority of 5 votes.
Under our constitution, it stands at the moment. If it's something like that, you need the approval of the constituent authority.
That's good to know. Thank you. I stand corrected. Thanks.
Okay. Any more comments or questions? No, I think we've done good there. I'd like to thank you, James. Particularly thank you, Dave, for your contributions. It's much appreciated. Members, we are asked to note the paper that went to the combined authority, and we've got options basically option 1 to support in principle or option 2 not to at this stage. I'm hearing, I think, a lot of consensus about option 1 to support in principle. I guess I'm looking for a member to nod along with that and a seconder as well. There's lots of nods, so don't think we need to take a vote. Councillor Waller?
I think there were comments about the democratic accountability of this. So I think it would be, my personal view is, from what I've heard, that we would expect there to be visibility of the outcome of that decision, and therefore, where is this £500,000 going? What is it achieving?
Councillor Wally, you're right, and I'm happy to make an extra note in the meeting minutes as alongside our support of option 1 regarding the points you made, and also the points Councillor Taylor made about the revenue, and of course any other points that members made. They're all valid. Councillor Taylor?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. I mean, it seems like there's consensus on this anyway, I think, about including the station within the boundary. Do we need to be explicit on that in the recommendation? Wouldn't do any harm, would it?
Yep. We can be particularly explicit on that point if you'd like us to, if you want to propose that.
Please.
Yep. I think second that. I'll second it. Did you want to mention anything, Councillor Hook?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just thinking, because you said about the heritage railway assets, are they like the Railway Institute, the ones around there? So do we extend it then to include the bus transfer as well? Because it's all about connectivity and people getting to places.
I'm happy for my comments to be taken away rather than to nudge specific buildings other than the station. But I am really pleased that you also support that and want to make a point of it. That's agreeable, but I think that's been heard by both City of York Council and the Combined Authority, but the station is pretty clear. Definitely want to ensure we mention that. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I mean, the integrated transport makes sense to me, etc. I'm just questioning the 52, paragraph 52, the proposed red line boundaries developed with the council reported through appropriate governance before designation. Obviously, I don't know what the timeframes are and the mechanisms there, but if there is an opportunity for that to be seen by scrutiny members to feed in comments on the specific line once drawn, that might be a better way than us trying to pick buildings at this point in time. But I don't know what the opportunity to feed in through that process is when it's sort of combined authority with fast decision points and so on. I don't know.
Again, I take the point on the citing of the red line. I think as members with an interest, we should pay particular interest to that. I don't think we need to get it back to scrutiny before it goes to executive.
I didn't mean scrutiny committee, just if scrutiny members have, because it says here, developed with the council reported through. So if scrutiny members have line of sight of it on its way through that process, there may be an opportunity to flag things, that's all.
I think we could make a request for that rather than it coming to a meeting. Yeah.
Chair,
Okay.
can I just come in? That wording was specific to allow the City of York to do what's appropriate for them in that process. So in a way, the wording's quite vague. It said that the combined authority were not doing to the City of York. It allows the City of York to do that.
Yeah, Councillor Vassy.
Yeah, I think on all sides we've expressed the same concern that this local authority should be engaged and involved in process. We've had reassurances about the difference between the MDZ and the MDC, and to the questions Councillor Rose asked, I think as long as the minutes contain within them that concern, that general concern that York doesn't find itself excluded from the decisions, I think we're happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with James on all that we've spoken about on this agenda item and write to the relevant executive members that are responsible for this area as well, so that the committee gets in at this stage those doubly those points, especially to those decision makers as well. If members are happy with that and with all that's been said, we are happy to support that option and then close the item.
Chair, can I just put on record my thanks to the City of York staff for the work and effort they put, not in the writing report, but in actually just to get us to where we are today. They've worked absolutely tirelessly to support us, so thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Okay, thank you. What time are we? Do we have a break or we just move on? Move on. We'll keep going. Okay, we'll move to the next agenda item straight away, members. Is that okay? We'll keep going. I'm not seeing anybody wanting a break, so we will carry on. It's the agenda item, York's Water Network, a health check. And we've got a good number of participants. So if I'd like to invite you forward to the table. So this item finds its way to scrutiny following a motion from Councillor Kent at last November's council meeting, the motion titled Tackling Pollution in York's Rivers. Councillor Kent, could I come to you?
Thank you, Chair. I want to say thank you to the committee for taking this item. Thank you to everyone who's come from Yorkshire Water and City of York Council. And in particular, thank you to all the public speakers who use and work on and live with the river and hold it very dear to their hearts. I just also wanted to remind the committee, if I could, about the content of the motion that we passed unanimously last November on the 6th, which was entitled Tackling Pollution in York's Rivers. And we made various notes of the levels of pollution within the river, particularly the Ouse, but also the Foss, many of which have been alluded to by the public speakers, so I won't go over those. But we also welcomed and supported the Aqua Citizen Science project and also Ecomix that Professor Boxall has outlined. And we resolved, if I could just read through the resolution so that we're aware, we all remember what we asked for at that point, to ask government, but equally, it could be independent water bodies and water companies who could do this, to adopt legislation mirroring the EU's revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive to prevent chronic pollution threatening public and environmental health. And whilst that could be national legislation, any water company could do that as a matter of course as part of its asset management strategy. To ban the use of recognised dangerous forever chemicals as quickly as possible, to urge a national investment programme to modernise sewage and highway drainage infrastructure, including storage, treatment and overflow controls, with priority given to areas serving York and the rivers Ouse and Foss. To request implementation of local pollution reduction measures, such as installing upstream buffer zones, first flush stormwater capture, and retrofitting sewage systems to reduce raw discharge events, whilst monitoring improvements through better reporting. To support and require the Environment Agency to more effectively monitor, understand and prevent water pollution and respond to incidents quickly, and to develop a fit-for-purpose chemical assessment and management system. And we also further resolved to support Aqua and Ecomix in publicising their local efforts to increase public awareness of the water pollution challenge and to share guidance on how residents can take small decisions to positively contribute to reducing pollution of our waterways themselves, which is a not insignificant action. So I just wanted to remind us that that's what the ask was of the motion. The letter to government has gone, but those asks remain of everybody involved in the water industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. So we received a report with a number of annexes, council review, a Yorkshire Water update, and some Environment Agency roles and responsibilities. Would anybody from Yorkshire Water or the council want to speak to their sections of the report?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Henderson from City of York Council. I'm aware that we kind of did the cover sheet, but substantively a lot of it's focused to an extent on Yorkshire Water. So obviously there's probably quite a lot to be, especially to respond to in terms of the stakeholders that have come along today. But I just wanted to say a couple of points, if that's all right, before I'll keep it short. Obviously there's a note the report. Clearly there's a number of actors involved in this. A water system does not recognise boundaries, so we're all connected ultimately. So we all have a part to play. CYC have an influence as much, and there's a couple of key collaboration projects that we've been working on. It's been a bit of a slow burn, but since I started in January 2025, I've seen a marked difference and change in the way we work with Yorkshire Water personally. And I think that's been all for the good. A couple of key ones is we're looking at a blue-green opportunity mapping, which is about identifying locations within the city where we can intercept surface water to stop so much going into the sewers, for example. So that's like a multifaceted project where it won't only bring benefits in terms of sewer water reduction to the sewers and hence the impact of CSOs on the rivers, but it'll also green the city, deal with things like heat islands, drought, etc. So it's multifaceted. So we're looking at that as a start for 10. This is a bit of a slow burn because for 40 years, the water industry, as an example, has obviously, for a number of years, there's been a number of issues, and it's not going to be a quick fix. But I think we're making some progress collaboratively with Yorkshire Water. We as stakeholders aren't necessarily the main impact of pollution on the water courses and rivers, but we still have a part to play because urban is still a big impact, highway runoff from highway, etc. But so we're also enablers as well. So we've been working obviously internally and externally with partners, and there's a number of different links we've made across the board. The other one I want to identify is the USWEM as well, USWEM project, which is a nationally significant project, which is one of only 25 in the country, looking at how we can slow the flow in the upper catchment to reduce the flood risk in York, because obviously fluvial risk is massive. But as part of that project as well, there's a significant focus on how we track and manage pollution from those catchments as well as flood risk. And it shouldn't really be underestimated how influential, impactful that will be in the context of looking at how we can reduce pollution, not only from our CSOs, which is point source discharge from Yorkshire Water, but also from agricultural diffuse pollution too, which they're two major elements of flooding pollution in our catchment. So we mustn't. This Yorkshire was only one part of the story, albeit quite important one, but there's others too. So just to say that we're also looking at that as a legacy project. York have been heavily involved in it from a flood risk impact point of view, but it obviously brings in wider partners as well. So that information and evidence will hopefully inform decisions going forward, not only by Yorkshire Water, but landowners too. So as City of York Council, I think we're punching above our weight in terms of having an impact beyond our borders to impact on and benefit ourselves in terms of flood risk, but also pollution and flood risk elsewhere as well. So I said I wouldn't ramble too much, but just to give you a couple of key highlights really about where we sit within this context.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Tim Myers. I'm the Head of Corporate Affairs at Yorkshire Water, and broadly that means facilitating our engagement with elected officials, with council officers, and with other wider stakeholders across Yorkshire as well. I'm joined today by James Gudgeon, who's our Pollution Reduction Manager, whose title is hopefully self-explanatory, and by Stephen Jackson, who's our River Health Manager, and who works with groups and we're at Yorkshire Water to monitor and identify pollution sources in our rivers, and particularly I think it'll be relevant about how we work with groups to identify where our assets are impacting rivers and where others are as well, and how we can work together on those. We've submitted the report, so I'm going to encourage both my colleagues to be brief as well when we do our introductions, but I would say that we have a series of other meetings going on at the moment with York City of York Council. I think Councillor Kent and Councillor Douglas are going to be meeting with me and one of my colleagues in August to discuss our performance report, which we circulated around to the leader and chief executive last year, and that last month, or earlier this month, sorry, I'm losing track of time. But that performance report is our annual performance report, sets out how we've performed across the year and key metrics, and we're trying to make that as easy to understand for people who aren't in the sector as possible, because there's a lot of regulatory targets in there. And so we also have started releasing a stakeholder performance report alongside that, which we will share a link around with the clerk and others as well for that to be shared. I'm conscious that there has been an incident on our clean water network in York in recent days. None of us here, I don't think, are specialists on the clean water network, but if there are any questions about that, we can take that away. And again, we, as well as the meeting with Councillors Douglas and Kent, we also have a meeting upcoming with director level and heads of the council to discuss our reinstatements work across the council area. So there's a few moving pieces there, but hopefully we can answer as many questions as you have today. Just to quickly set out that Yorkshire Water, we have three primary regulators. We have Ofwat, our economic regulator, the Environment Agency, primary environmental regulator, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate, who manage drinking water quality. And then alongside other organisations such as Natural England and the Consumer Council for Water, that sort of forms the regulatory environment in which we operate. If we speak about any of those organisations, that's because it shapes our investment programmes and how we operate. So we're regulated in 5-year periods. We've just finished the end of in April, we finished the end of our first year of that period, and that was what the annual report that was published earlier this month covers. During the period, we are investing £8.3 billion, and in the first year, there was £990 million spent across the region. We have around 1,500 projects that are either live in planning or on the ground at the moment. And that's a considerable step up from the last 5-year period when there was £5.6 billion of investment across that period. And just for context, for example, on our clean water network, that means we've done 175 kilometres of mains replacements already. That's more than we did in the entire of the last 5-year period. You may have noticed sort of increased roadworks linked with Yorkshire Water. That is, as well as some of the reactive works that unfortunately we have to go to, that is to do with our capital investment programme as well. I will say that as well as alongside releasing our annual report, as well as setting out the investment that's been going on and performance trends, we did also announce that we're likely to be a 1-star company this year for the environmental performance report assessment. Sorry, that's very disappointing for us. It's something that we published in our report that also got some coverage in local media as well. The reasons for that are 3 primary factors that we went on to red metrics. 2 of those are related to pollutions, both total pollutions and serious pollutions, which James will touch on in a second. The third factor was to do with the delivery of the Water Industry National Environment Programme in the last asset management period between 2020 and 2025, where we didn't deliver 5 schemes in West Leeds. We did deliver 668 other schemes in that programme, but we didn't deliver those 5. And so that put us into a red metric, and obviously very disappointed with that. And we are making sure that we prioritise the delivery of those schemes by 2028 in West Leeds, as well as the schemes across this asset management period. We are conscious that the investment that we're doing can be disruptive, and that alongside other incidents, reactive incidents, that can also be disruptive to residents who work very closely with partners across the region. I'm going to hand over to James first, and then to Stephen, just for a very brief sort of summary of their roles and responsibilities.
Good evening. So I'm James Gudgeon, Pollution Reduction Manager, and that itself is a new role that we've created in the business. And ultimately, my job is to understand our pollution performance, make sure everybody in the business understands that, and that we've got clear plans in place to take our performance to where it needs to be. both in terms of our targets and our ambitions. I think in terms of what we can share on that, we've got our pollution incident reduction plan, which is published on our website. And that actually encapsulates quite nicely the steps that I'm trying to instigate in the company of looking at what the root cause analysis, so what has triggered a pollution incident, and making sure we understand that and then turn that into a number of activities that are targeted at preventing what's causing the pollution at source. So that's available at the website, and that shows what we're doing over the next 12 months. And then at the minute, we're very busy internally as well, just looking at what actually do we need to do live in the next 6 months to address our operational management, and then actually what's in store over the next 3 to 5 year periods as well.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Jackson, River Health Strategy Manager at Yorkshire Water. So as Tim mentioned, I'm heavily involved in river health improvement type activities across Yorkshire, and particularly working with local stakeholder groups and other third parties to try and work in partnership to improve river water quality. You'll find in the paper, there's a lot of supporting information about river health in York within the paper. I'll give some of the sort of the key messages. I think we've recognised that we have a significant part to play, as was mentioned earlier, but it's also highlighted that there's multiple of the pressures associated with water quality in the York area. And we continue to work closely with the Environment Agency, local councils, environmental organisations and the agricultural sector across a broad range of pressures to try and improve river water quality. A good example of how we're working closely with the council is around misconnections. So for those who don't know, misconnections are where a homeowner has incorrectly plumbed their wastewater into a surface water network, and then that can ultimately result in entering a water course. Working with local authorities, we've made good progress in identifying and resolving some misconnection issues, but there are still 6 known open misconnections within the York area that we need to continue to work together on to get resolved. We've also built good relationships with organisations that interact with the rivers around York, some of which are here today. So the River Foss Society we work really closely with, and we've supported with citizen science activities. Use It or Lose It, who have spoken today, we've been engaging with recently, similar around citizen science improvements, alongside Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust, and also supporting the Aqua project that's been mentioned. And in addition, we're looking to increase monitoring across the river network within York, with an additional circa 30 monitors going into the river, and we'll be keen to continue to work in partnership with the council around getting those deployed in the future.
Thank you all for the report and for speaking to it. Members, I would like to open it up to questions and comments. Considering the detail in the report and its annexes and what we've just heard, I will go first to Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, there are sewage discharges into the Foss. You'll know that there are several housing developments in the area which will add thousands of houses to the Foss catchment. What plans are there to increase your capacity to deal with future developments?
Yeah, so I suppose housing developments put an extra effluent into the network. It's something that we have to manage, and we manage that partly by engaging with local authorities around their growth areas, so we can plan that into, and we have growth funding within our budgets to invest in areas that are experiencing growth. But I suppose the sort of underlying principles that we work to are the targets that we have to meet from our regulators, and that will inevitably drive us to ensure that those sites do not discharge to a high level. So those there's different types of targets are set by regulators. So for Ofwat, for example, our economic regulator as part of our final settlement, we have to halve the number of discharges across this asset management period. And then you may be aware of the storm overflow discharge reduction plan targets set by government, which mean that we have to discharge less than 10 times from each overflow by 2050 on average. So we have those targets we're aiming for. So we have to plan in where that development's going to be. We have to model how it's going to affect our network, and then we have to make sure that it's not going to lead to more discharges.
Will that entail more capacity in the area, and when will that come on stream's the wrong word, but when will that be in place?
So it might entail more capacity, or it might entail taking surface water out of the network that already goes into it. We prefer to take surface water out of the network through green blue solutions, or through just generally better catchment of rainwater and directing it straight to watercourses or to other holding facilities such as sustainable urban drainage, which then releases it at a slow rate into the watercourses. But it might mean more capacity. I mean, York poses some quite specific challenges due to the age of the city and the size of the roads and the networks. So it's sometimes difficult to get down and build storage. So that's why green blue with nature-based solutions is particularly valuable in the city.
But there's no definite capacity plan currently.
No, we don't know that for that exact example, but it's something we can take away to have a look at.
Yeah, thank you.
We've got our developer services department, which works alongside developers and the councils to get that information and understand what do we need to do for specific developments. So we can take that away for them.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of comments, and I don't think any of them are positive. I'll pick one that follows up from that point, which is around the sort of storm overflow discharges bit. 7,965. 64,000 hours of spills, which is 7 years in the last 3-year period available. And you know, there's a bit on the website that you've got that says, and in the annual report that says, our storm overflow discharge is legal. Almost all discharges that occur from a storm overflow are due to rainfall. There's one at 4:07 p.m. today in Poppleton, and it doesn't look very wet out. We had 2 hours straight on the 26th of June in Lehman Road, 20 minutes in Acomb the same day. The week before that, we had Acomb Front Street. We had near the Fox and Holgate discharges. We had the same time in the Clockhouse and Acomb, all on relatively dry days. Maybe I missed one of them was raining, but it's interesting that it's in the report that it says we met our target for our use of storm overflows in 2025. It talks about average discharges and so on. It talks about the uptime, which is only 96.2%, which, as someone who used to do monitoring and reporting with DEFRA, and we were looking at 99.95 or 99.99, 96% is, I think, probably the worst I've seen in 10 years of any form of monitoring anywhere. Slightly different when it's physical than virtual, but still. It just feels like there's a massive problem here that it isn't storm overflow, that storm overflow discharges are being used for. And it's a shame that we've only got Yorkshire Water here today as well, because I just wanted to call out the OEP Office for Environment Protection's investigation report to December 2025 that looked into whether Ofwat and the Environment Agency and DEFRA met legal requirements. And the conclusion of that was that the OEP investigation found there have been failures to comply with environmental law by each of the 3 public authorities related to the regulation of network CSO. So, you know, that's slightly different to the storm drains thing, but it isn't just a failure by Yorkshire Water, but it is a failure by Yorkshire Water, and coming in narrowly under the mark on that one when going way over. And you mentioned, you know, red KPIs, but you didn't mention what the numbers were. I can ask that as well. But what are we doing here? The report you've got in front of us doesn't say anything negative. It really doesn't. And your annual report has loads of detail about all the ways in which our water network is really, really bad. I commend you on being here today, but I don't commend Yorkshire Water on any of the work it's doing on any of these KPIs. So you know, appreciating some of the points about we're trying to do better and we've got a target to reduce the number and so on. It feels like you can reduce the number now if you wanted to, since you're using them when there aren't storms. But it would be great if you could comment on the usage of storm drains outside of rainfall periods. Thank you.
So, yeah, so I suppose there was quite a bit of comment in the comment that you said, and there was a question at the end. So I'll try and answer the spirit of what you're asking as well as the actual question. So, I would say that the action that we're taking on reducing discharges is concrete. It's there. There's £1.5 billion over the next 5 years in reducing discharges from storm overflows. We have that target to reduce it by half within the 5-year period, and then we have the target up to 2050 as well on how our assets should be operating. And if we don't hit those targets, then it's not just a slap on the wrist. There are quite significant financial penalties for us. So we have to hit them, and we are intending to hit them. So we are taking it really seriously to do that. How the network's operating now, I'd say that we acknowledge it's not operating necessarily how we'd want it to across the network. But where there are dry day discharges, which I think is what you're referencing in terms of there hasn't been a rainfall incident within the previous 48 hours or so, then that does trigger an investigation from us about what's going on at that site. And it can be things like blockages on the network caused by wet wipes or fogs, fat oils and greases. And we go out and we investigate that. But I think you're right to flag that on the live, near to live, because it's around an hour to verify, map that we have that shows discharges. There are some that raise questions, and it's right that you ask about them. We can go and look at those. But the point is that we are driving down discharges because we have to.
I've got a million other questions, but just to follow up on those points, I appreciate the point you're making. If you look on the map of where discharges have taken place, I would say 70% of locations, maybe 80–90%, have a discharge since the last time it rained enough to create any flash flood anywhere in the city, and they're all at different times, which is also an interesting coincidence if they're being used unintentionally and it's all due to incidents. So, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to comment on whether they're deliberately used outside of wet weather, but that's what the data looks like. And just another comment on consequences. Yeah, I mean, it is you paying the financial penalties, but it is us paying the financial penalties. And it does feel like you only take KPIs seriously. I don't mean you personally, Yorkshire Water. Only take it seriously when there are these serious consequences. And I would say, gun to your head, you do take them seriously, but you've missed a bunch of KPIs, including the number of pollution incidences, the number of serious pollution incidences, including a law written specifically to stop bonuses from being paid. They're paid from offshore accounts. They're hidden from people. I think at this point, it might have to be a literal gun to your head to make Yorkshire Water actually comply with any of the legislation. And I am sure that you intend to follow the requirements and reductions in the next year that are listed. But I don't believe that you'll meet them because I don't really believe you've met any of the other requirements that have been met, including only 5 missed on assets, but all the other asset management that hasn't taken place. That's not a question, sorry, but a rebuttal maybe.
Okay, that's fine. I can come back to you, Councillor Rose, after including more members. If you want to respond to Councillor Rose's points there, or
we can probably respond in response to other questions as well.
Councillor Vassy.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to welcome you to come to the table. I think it's actually really important that this discussion takes place because that's the only way we move on. My party has been campaigning to hold water companies to account for many years, and I'm proud we've done so on forever chemicals, health impacts, sewage discharges, pay awards, the kind of issues that Councillor Rose has raised. But as politicians here today, I really want to focus on what we can do to sort out the regulations that allow the bad stuff to happen. And I'm pleased to see within this report some of the clues as to why that takes place. So my questions are these really, for Mark, actually, as the CYC officer. Can you please confirm, Mark, that if the government made Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act mandatory in England, as it is in Wales, then many of the continuing problems with surface water overwhelming the drainage system and causing some of the 10,000s of sewage spills might be dramatically reduced? And do you think that by not making it mandatory and enabling developers to avoid delivering surface water management technologies onto their developments, we're exacerbating the network problems that we face? Because my interest is, yes, I do get it. As I say, the water companies have a lot of questions to ask. But as local authorities and as national government, we create regulations, we set the context in which things happen. And we've seen in Haxby, for example, last year on the 700 homes, at a planning meeting, I raised the issue on multiple occasions. What are we doing to create soakaways? What are we doing to create green roofs? What are we doing to reduce the possibility of surface water going to the water companies, overwhelming the system? So if you could give us some context on Schedule 3, Mark, that would be really helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Basey. Yes, yeah. So the Schedule 3 was it hasn't been enacted, but it was included in the Flood and Water Management Act 2010 as part of an overall assessment of where we need to go after the floods in 2007, and it would involve us as an authority, effectively a separate element of any planning application. You would also separately adopt, or not as the case may be, but essentially as a planning authority or a drainage authority, you would review and adopt the drainage system separate from the planning permission itself. So it'd be two separate processes, but in effect there'd be one for the purposes of designing and delivering it. It hasn't been enacted by central government since 2015, since 2012, since it was put in, and there's been a significant delay for various reasons, which you can read in the press or if you read between the lines, because it is essentially another administrative burden, effectively. So it's not. So there's some various different edicts from up high, so to speak, as Councillor Pickles in 2015. There's various different ministerial guidance and also SUDS guidance, which has supported the review of SUDS. But in effect, at the moment, most SUDS features that are implemented, new developments, don't have to be. There's no statutory requirement for us to adopt them. If they were adopted, that would probably formalise it and create a system where, or whoever would adopt it, because it wouldn't necessarily have to be the local authority. It could be Yorkshire Water. It could be any recognised adopting authority for all SUDS features. Yes, at the moment there are a number of SUDS features on public and private land which are not maintained. And if, for example, it was more formalised and enacted as a SAB, where you statutory SUDS approval body, and it was more formalised, then you probably wouldn't be in that position. So yes, you would have, going forward, you'd have far more SUDS features, hopefully above ground as well. And I can come back to that slightly in terms of what we call a SUDS, because a lot of what's SUDS at the moment is effectively a crate in the ground, which is not ideally when you look at the 4 pillars of SUDS, which is a biodiversity, amenity, flood risk, etc. They're not really ticking all those boxes. So it's been a bit of a missed opportunity. But notwithstanding that, we still have SUDS being delivered, but they're not necessarily maintained going forward because they're put into management companies. There's real criticism. You find them across the board, so they don't work efficiently, and therefore there is definitely an impact on the system that is the Yorkshire Water system or the sewer system, that then because everything effectively what happens is you hold it and then it discharges in most cases in York, because we're on clay. It won't just seep into the ground because it can't. So you have to hold it and then allow it to discharge, or filter it before it goes into the system. So you have got probably a lot of assets out there that don't effectively work, and they're going straight into the system. So yes, that does have a part to play. So yeah, I would suggest that having some sort of SUDS approval body would make a difference. Absolutely. You have got the changes, and we mentioned in the report about how we vet SUDS now in the new national standards which have been revised, and there's a couple of really clear things in there, which is one is about taking out the first 5 mil of any water that discharges into the sewer, into whatever feature it is, a water body or a sewer. So that's quite powerful. It basically means you have to filter it before it gets to that. So you have to have some sort of blue-green above ground filter system to stop the pollution getting in the first place. So that's just playing out. That was only that national guidance was only published in July. So it's been incorporated into our guidance, and we're now reviewing applications coming forward to try and filter out the first flush of pollutants, because in any system, effectively, it's the first 5 mil of rainfall will flush everything out, and that's where you get the real impact. So that critical thing in there will help. In terms of new developments, it doesn't necessarily solve all the issues that we've identified here, which is about the legacy piece, about probably there's multiple reasons why you're getting CSOs that are spilling in dry weather as well as wet weather, capacity, maintenance, that it goes across the board. So for new developments, yes, there seemingly is a step change, but I think it could go further if you had a SAB. Hopefully that answers some of, from my wisdom and knowledge from 10 years of being in the industry, hopefully it sort of answers some of that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just say that we're really supportive of Schedule 3 being adopted, because it takes water out of the sewer network as well, and we've had that position for quite some time, so is the wider industry.
Thank you. Can I follow up, please, Chair? So from that, it begs the question whether this local authority could do more with its planning documents to require developers in York to build SUDs onto all new developers. Have you seen Cambridge's SUDS design and adoption guide by any chance? I ask because it's 97 pages long. It's full of pictures and diagrams and help for developers. And I compare it with what we've got, and it's not to knock whoever created what we've got, but our document is 20 pages long and is really just text. Do you think it would be a good thing for us to look at best practice elsewhere and maybe even adopt the Cambridge Guide if you've seen it, or to look at it and consider adopting it, so that developers can be given solutions in much more clear language and illustrations to help drive change?
Yeah, I think we could always improve, absolutely. So yeah, I would wholeheartedly support that. And yes, we would definitely, yeah, we've reviewed it just recently to take on board the changes that have come through the national standards, but there's no reason why we can't review it in light of yeah, other best practice examples. Absolutely. I think it also is important that we do work with, for example, developer services at Yorkshire Water, because these guys here also vet the drainage systems, and there's also the internal drainage boards as well. They look at stuff too. So there's not just us in the mix here. There's 3 other statutory consultees. Well, IDBs aren't statutory consultees, but nonetheless they still comment on loads of applications. But Yorkshire Water are, I think. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And I think there's probably us looking at our own house, so to speak, but also cross-referring to others as well to make sure we're all joined up. It also goes in strategic policy as well. So we're looking at our local plan as well. So there's some quite powerful levers we can also push, not only in our guidance to respond to planning applications, but also set the scene for what we are expecting new developments going forward. And so we're setting up meetings, for example, with Catherine Brooker, who's at the I don't know if I should mention individual names, but yeah, she's sort of strategic planning at Yorkshire Water, and they're having meaningful discussions with some of our strategic planners within City of York Council to look at how we can maybe incorporate some of that understanding into the overall strategic drivers, because those policies can be quite powerful, not just your guidance, but your policies, and can really influence things if you get them right. So yeah.
Thank you. I'd be happy, Chair, if it's useful to give copies of the documents I'm referring to you, so they can be incorporated maybe in the minutes to help inform us.
Yeah, I've noted it as well. I am familiar with Schedule 3, so when we get to the end of the agenda item, if we're looking at rounding up, I can come back to it with some sort of plan. Next is Councillor Waller.
Thank you,
Chair, and I'm grateful for the people who've come to the end of the table because there were a lot of interesting reports given, and I do keep the pit report on the shelf, and it's useful to see the concept of, yes, we had significant issues as a nation at that point, and there are lots of lessons learned, but not fully implemented. And I think that's the frustrating thing, that there has to be periodically a national catastrophe for policymakers to actually say, oh, well, we meant to do that the last time. We should, as a nation, require work that prevents similar events happening in the future. And the capacity to deal with surface water is a significant one. There are developments that happen where the pipes aren't properly connected, and the way in which the building industry operates, they just get away with it. And it's either the local authority or, in some cases, individual householders who become responsible for sorting the problems out. And it would be, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how that can be progressed with all of the development that's coming forward. I'd also ask about third-party pollution that impacts on the watercourses. There was one in June which seemingly impacted on water supply to us in the upper reaches of Askham Lane and Chapel Fields. And I think it is connected to some correspondence I've had with your chief executive in terms of Severus Water Tower. But I think it's because things are so connected in a way that the public don't always fully understand, and think that the person who's answered the phone when they've got no water is not giving the full facts. But I think trying to educate the public and councillors and decision makers about, well, these things are connected. You might not think it, but they are, because in the past, some Victorian engineer took the view that, yes, we will build a big pipe along this way. It's not entirely logical, but we're going to do it. And therefore, 100 years later, you're left dealing with that legacy. So it's recognising that some things will happen as a result of new development, and you have more sway over what happens there. But there are some legacy issues that you need to deal with. But that connects with all of the discharges that happen in the city and surrounding areas that impact on the quality of the water in the rivers.
So just covering off a few things, I think firstly, the legacy issues you reference and the investment plans that we've talked about are in place to tackle the number of discharges and generally pollutions, regulatory classified pollutions from our network. We have those plans. Developers, you touch on. We have had situations, some of you might have come across this as ward councillors, where we haven't been able to adopt certain networks because they haven't been completed to a standard. It's also been a bit of a problem across the East Riding of Yorkshire, which is quite close to this area. That can lead to really awkward situations where the council would like us to adopt. We say we can't adopt because the network isn't up to standard. And that is something I think that the council and us have quarterly meetings where we discuss both tactical and strategic issues. I think it's something that as you build out your local plan, that we can talk about, okay, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen? Because it can be extremely frustrating for people who have moved into those properties as well. The third party pollutions that you talked about, I'll hand over to Stephen in a second, but the one that you're referencing from, I think it was around the 20th of June, because I was just heading on annual leave and I was on standby that weekend and was called into lots of meetings over the weekend. We had an agricultural pollution into the ooze. Yaw and then down into the Ouse, which impacted several of our water treatment facilities where we abstract from the river, high phosphorus levels within the river, and that happens. We were one of the first responders because phosphorus in the river is often can be linked to our wastewater treatment networks. In this case, it wasn't, but it did cause us difficulties because it was a rather warm period as well, and there was high water usage. It just shows the interconnectivity that we do have and why we have to work with partners. But Stephen, is there anything else in terms of third-party pollution and how we investigate?
Yes, in terms of third parties, I suppose actually, first you touched on misconnections, as we call it, as where developers have incorrectly connected to our network. I mentioned our developer services. One thing that we've been doing internally is making sure the guidance and the support that we provide the developers or individual homeowners, as it can be, is really clear and in layman's terms, in effect, of what needs to happen. And then that's something that we, again, reach out to the councils and would really are willing to work with the councils to make sure that we can expedite and get any misconnections through the processes to get them resolved. In terms of third parties, so something that's happened across the industry and the nation is a change of regulation driven by the Environment Agency, referred to as the Water Industry Regulatory Incidents Guidance. That's substantially changed as of this January. And that actually puts the onus for a lot of what we'd previously deemed as third-party issues onto the water company, unless we have done an amount of proactive work. And what we've been working on over the last 2 years is making sure that we understand what is causing that third-party pollution. We've been working with food establishment services to make sure that we understand and we're proactively engaging with them to educate what they're putting down. Something we've done in York over the last 2 years is fit biological blocks in the sewers that help break down fats, oil and greases. That's something that was a huge cause of blockage in the city of York. And actually, since we've done that trial, which has continued, that's reduced the amount of fats, oil and greases blockages by over 90%. So a huge change there in third-party pollutions caused by fats, oil and greases. There's a lot of other reasons for third-party pollutions as well. And again, we've been looking internally of how do we create more jobs to engage with more parties, as well as how do we work with the councils on, again, misconnections and other industries that go into the network.
Okay. Yes, just in addition to that, I guess the additional monitoring that we are installing onto the river network. So you may be aware that under Section 82 of the Environment Act, we now need to install upstream and downstream monitors in the river to monitor our impact, but they will also pick up wider impacts on that river and allow us to investigate and work with third parties to investigate potential other sources of pollution outside of our own. And then also to some of the groups that we've been working with who are doing a lot of citizen science monitoring, that often highlights issues that we're not aware of and allows us to proactively get out there and investigate and support those groups to resolve those issues as well. So just really keen to continue and engaging with those groups because often they can see things on a day-to-day and report them through to us and give us an opportunity to resolve the issue.
Councillor Hook, did you want a supplementary on this?
It was getting supplementary and it moved away from it, so it's probably new now.
Can I move to Councillor Clark and then I'll come back to you?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hook. Yeah, it's just, I suppose coming back to this, and this is a bit of casework come up this week actually. For me, it's just when we talk about misconnections and unadopted systems and things. So if we have residents that bought properties from developers, there are misconnections, and I guess to some extent this is a question for CYC as well. And perhaps, you know, if we've got unadopted highway, we've got surface water drainage underneath that unadopted highway, you know, what is the support and what can we do to support residents in kind of rectifying the situation for them? Because it feels like it's up to you to sort it out as a private dweller. They may not have the expertise or that understanding of what needs to be done and what they can do and what support is available for help to help them do that.
I'll pick up in brief, Councillor Clark, your first question. So we do, obviously the reason that we don't get involved in non-adopters is the financial liability that we would take by doing that. But we do provide a lot of support through the highway asset management team, a lot of support for private residences and where there is unadopted highway and associated infrastructure with that. And through the streetworks team and through the highway regulations team, we do a lot of work with developers to try and make sure that they get things up to standard within the regulatory framework that sort of surrounds it. But what I would say to residents is that we would, if a resident has an issue, we'd be here to listen, but obviously there are processes to go through and reasoning why we wouldn't necessarily adopt a piece of highway. And residents are usually fairly understanding of that, or are usually aware of that because of previous arrangements with developers and things like that. I can think of a few sites off the top of my head where this is the case. I don't know if you're sure what colleagues have any supplementaries.
I don't think we're necessarily the right people to focus on the detail of unadopted networks at the moment, but what we can do, I think, is if council officers are okay with this, is we can put this on the agenda of our next quarterly catch-up, make sure the right officers are connected. I think looking ahead to the build out of some of the sites which are going to be in the city, around the city, make sure we minimise any problems.
So I've got Councillor Taylor, Hook, and then Perrott, and then I might go back round again. I might have to take a break once we hit 2 hours. So what did I just say? Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 questions, but I don't need to do them all right now. If we're going to get another go and have a break. I think I'll do 2 now, and I'll save my last one for later. Thinking about the public speakers, just to try and capture some of what they've said. One of the speakers mentioned, or he asked for potentially closing the Hull Road Park CSO, and that's something. I mean, I'm interested in knowing more about the how realistic is that? What's the impact of that? Would it lead to other communities asking for the same thing? I'm just interested to know more about that, really. If we can have any response from council or Yorkshire Water reps.
Yeah, that was probably best me. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. In terms of Hull Road, so looking at our part of the 1.5 billion that we mentioned, in terms of that 1.5 billion, there's 126 million ring fenced for York itself. I've just been checking from when that was raised earlier. I've been checking our investment plans. So Hull Road is on our investment plans within this 5-year period. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact detail to what is happening with Hull York Road. In all I can say right now is we have committed investment to tackling that within this period. But that's something we can get back exactly what the plans are. Again, the plans could be increasing capacity of sewers, introducing surface water management, or it could be closing it down, but I can't say which one it is, unfortunately. We can take that away.
Thank you. Cheers. My second question, Chair. Another speaker mentioned, and forgive me if I'm misquoting this, they referenced the River Wye and that it has a charter which sort of gives it rights. And maybe that could the use have something along those lines? Just interested in views on that, and I'll be frank to try and elicit an honest response. Would something like that just become another one of those nice documents that reads really well but gets ignored by everyone that matters, or could that make a difference? I'd like to think it would make a difference. So interested in views, even from the executive member. I'm sure she's aware of that kind of thing. Thank you.
So it's thanks for the question. So it's not completely in the same vein as a charter, but it's something we have done elsewhere in Yorkshire with council bodies, where we've developed sort of memorandums of understanding around how we're going to tackle river health problems together. And that, I guess, is something that we would be interested to work in partnership with people to develop from a Yorkshire Water perspective.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I welcome any action that's going to improve water quality, but your question is really, is that the most effective action? And I find that hard to answer. If local organisations are wanting the River Charter, I think we have a good dialogue and I work together very well with them because we all support the same aim. So I would definitely support it, but I wouldn't want it to deflect from real concrete action on improving water quality, which I think actually it's generally different people who it takes all of us, and it's different people who work on those different parts of it. But another thing that was aiming for, I think that kind of ask around a river charter was a baseline that we can measure real improvement against. So a state of the use report, which for me would be a more tangible, I'm not dismissing it at all, but for me, my focus would be on having a baseline now, because whilst we can track how many CSOs are improved and we can track individual actions by individual partners, how many misconnections are reconnected, all of that, what we all really want to do is have good water quality. And so we could repair all the CSOs, but we still might, or up to a legal standard, but the water quality still might not be what we want. So for me, the better focus would be a state of the use report, baselining where we're at, and we can use the very comprehensive data that Professor Boxall's talked about, and some of the Environment Agency and Water's own data, and then work together in partnership to actually make tangible increases year on year, dramatic increases, improvements in that, so that water quality is that's the outcome. We want to improve water quality. All these others are parts of ways to get there, but that's what I want to measure. I want a baseline, and I want us to see progress on that. So I think that would be my bigger focus, but I welcome any actions if that helps.
Okay, Councillor Rose on this.
Yeah, just specifically on the point around quality of water, it's probably not a question for well, I don't know who it would be a question for, but we had the public participant talk about this photo that had just been around Facebook of what we call York Beach under Ouse Bridge, and you know, the many comments saying, oh well, you know, river water used to be great 50 years ago and we used to go for a splash. I guess a small commentary on that is there's a lot of times that people used to do things that with the benefit of more scientific knowledge and better monitoring, we might not want to consume as much asbestos or whatever it might be. But also that there are lots of other locations that people that are local know that they can safely or otherwise go for a dip in the Ouse. And so I guess two questions. First is, what's the quality of the river genuinely like now compared to 1960, 70, 80? The second one is, reading the report and the bathing water designation piece, the water isn't clean enough to receive that at the moment. We won't get the investment to bring it to that standard because it isn't designated that, but we can't designate it because it's not clean enough. So it feels like we're trapped in that thing that people are using it, you know, to dip in, but the quality of water isn't there, and the funding that goes with it isn't there. My understanding may be way off because I've only understood it from this report, but what's the quality of water like, and that whole bathing water designation piece, where does it stand?
I think this is going to seem like I'm pushing responsibility away, but it's not. The river health and overall responsibility for monitoring it is with the Environment Agency, and they're the people who create the formal classification, including the assessment of the reasons for not achieving good, which are the ones that are listed out in the report. So it's not really for us, I suppose, to be monitoring that river all the time and seeing what's making it healthy and what isn't. We do step into that place, particularly around where our assets are and how our assets impact the river, but it's the Environment Agency that has that responsibility. And then the second part of the question, bathing water. So I think the reason that was included in the report is there are certain areas of Yorkshire where suddenly we've generated a lot of Yorkshire water investment, such as Ilkley, Knaresborough is about to get similar, and Wetherby as well. and that's sort of tens of millions of pounds going into the wastewater networks. The reason that goes in is because they have a designated bathing water area, and that acts as a driver which secures us the funding through our economic regulator of what we have had other situations where we've wanted to invest in specific assets and it's been taken out because it's not seen as having a driver, not by us, by our regulators. So we come and we have this sort of engagement, and we also have lots of other engagement with regional stakeholders. Sometimes the decision about where we invest isn't our decision. It's done by our regulators. Environmental regulator says where the priority areas are. They inform the economic regulator, and the economic regulator takes some of it out in the interest of keeping bills down.
That I mean, that would make sense. This is why I was saying I wasn't sure it was a question for, because it's probably the EA they're not here. But if the council's able to answer the same question of, are we stuck in a catch-22? The water's not clean enough to be designated, but we can't get the funding because it isn't designated. And then the kind of quality of water piece, even I know we're not responsible for it, but what's the general sentiment from experts on what the quality of water is like?
And just a final very quick comment. The reason that's in there as well is because we know there has been political interest and interest in community groups around bathing water, so that's put in there for that context.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, we'll take a.
There wasn't an answer to either of my questions though, down here. If any of the York officers are able to answer.
I'm going to Councillor Kent. Thank you.
So I wait to be stand corrected by officers or Yorkshire Water, but my feeling about the bathing water status is that that it's going around the houses to try and get something. We all want improved water quality, and not just bathing water quality. So if we stick with bathing water quality to qualify, you also have to prove certain kinds of infrastructure, changing rooms, parking, access, things like that. So in a sense, you have to build you have to build something to get to somewhere, and you have to show that 100 odd people, I forget the exact numbers, but are regularly swimming there. People regularly swim all over the place in York, in the river, without changing places or parking, and they don't necessarily do it yet, although use it or lose it are changing that in numbers of that magnitude. But even if you get that, all you then get is an obligation on the Environment Agency to monitor the water. So we have lots of bathing water designated statuses in England which regularly fail the water quality. So you can achieve it, and then you get a monitoring, which I say should be mandatory everywhere anyway. And my focus is better. I think our focus is better on just improving the water quality, because it's not just bathing water. Absolutely, I'm interested in human health, but I'm really, really concerned about aquatic environment health. And that's a different thing, because the threat to humans, if I understand Professor Boxall's science correctly, actually is rather low in your. There isn't that's not the biggest threat in the Ouse and the Foss. The threat is to our environment and to all the species who live there, and that's significant and damaging to all of us in a much bigger environmental way. And so it's damaging to human health, but not because we can't swim in the water. So absolutely pursue it if you want that, but we want to improve the water quality overall, and everyone should be working for that, not through this sort of slightly niche bathing water status, which is a lot of effort, a lot of expenditure, and doesn't actually achieve the end result that we want. Anyway, sorry, officers, if you wanted to add to that.
I think you're closer to it, Jenny, and I fully wholeheartedly agree with you based on our conversations and limited conversations with, because I deal with flood risk. I don't necessarily, I'm quite hamstrung. I don't deal with water quality, which in some ways is a bit of a narrative there, is like, who is representing the river from all of us? And that is a question that, Mark, that I think keeps coming back to me, is like, I'm getting asked to delve into water quality, and my JD doesn't say that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't expand it, but the council can only do so much. And it's like, who's going to be the champion for river that embraces all of our beliefs? And that's, you keep coming back to that, really. But I'd agree with Jenny, really. I'd defer to her, really, in her knowledge.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think we've had a good go there. We do need to take a break. There are members that do want to continue asking questions, quite rightly. It's a really important issue. I really value all of your time, but we're going to need to take 5 to 10 minutes and then come back and continue. Is that okay? Okay, I'm going to try and be back here in 5 minutes. We will reconvene. Thank you, members. We will continue questions and comments on this agenda item. I have a list of people willing to speak who haven't spoken, and then we'll go back round with members that have got further to add. So I will start now with Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd just like to make a comment. We've been talking about new developments, but actually there's this big issue, especially where I live, of hidden developments where the built area is actually gone up by 50% because they buy a small house, make it bigger because they can't afford to do it any other way. And we've got loads of 6-bedroom houses that formerly were 2-bedroom houses and things like that. And it just is using up all the surface area for the water to drain into and causing blocked sewage issues because they're old sewers and all sorts of problems. But that's just an observation to raise that. I don't expect you to answer. The big question was, I was in Easingwold the other week on the Kyle and Upper Rose drainage board and got back into the car park at the Galtree Centre, and it was swarming with Yorkshire Water people and vans and everyone saying, and we said, oh, wonder what that's going on there, you know. And then we realised later on that there'd been an incident and they were handing out bottled water to people. And so they were setting up a station to do that in that car park. And it went as far as Rawcliffe Bar. And everyone on Facebook saying, what's happening? What's happening? And that's what we need. We need communication when there are incidents like this, because, you know, why is it happening? Why is Yorkshire Water? I mean, you were helpful. You handed out the bottled water, but people didn't know why and how they should be acting. Should they be panicking in Skelton? Should they be, you know? So that was the question. It's really, nowadays you can communicate just like that. We need communication.
Yeah, so it's a really valid point. It's one that comes a lot on communications, and particularly because of the diverse range of people that there are. Some people who are on the internet, some who aren't. So on an incident of that scale, we'll usually send out a blast. We call it through a text blast through SMS. We will also do social media advertisements. And dependent on what the incident is, if it's getting on towards a boil order, then you'll have something hand delivered to each property. If it's something where there's going to be a temporary supply interruption, then you'll also have our priority services register, who are customers with challenging circumstances or vulnerabilities, will be visited as well and have bottled water dropped off to them. So it tends to be through social media sources themselves if the incident goes on for long enough, and text blasts through to our customers. There are primary ways of getting in touch.
Just that people from comments I've heard are desperate to know when things happen, and better communication is always good.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perrott.
Thanks, Chair. For me, I think I've been wondering throughout sort of what the shift is going to be from that sort of more reactive to proactive solutions. So you talked about increases in capital investment programmes, sort of running alongside that, ongoing repair, maintenance, that reactive stuff. For me, I think it just left me wondering, how much is that burden going to increase? How will that sort of balance be struck? Because if the infrastructure is currently aging, if you're now putting in place all of these additional capital sort of investments to make the improvements, how much of the stuff that's the sort of creaking older system that is overwhelmed going to keep failing? And we'll see obviously things like the sort of incident in sort of a couple of councils Hayes Ward recently, where, you know, we're seeing streets flooded and it's sort of, you know, a catastrophic sort of big incident because there's not that ongoing sort of maintenance. It is just almost trying not to use all of the finger in the dam kind of water puns for it, but it's that how much is that balance going to shift? You know, is the investment actually going to be put into that, or is it going to just be there will be more reactive things and we will have to, because it's an emergency, deal with that first? So I don't know if you can give me a bit more of a sense of how you'll prioritise things.
Yeah, so I would say that some of the investment package is largely proactive, but it's proactive across enhancements, which are where we're doing things better to a higher standard than they've been done before. So that includes reducing discharges. It also includes, phosphorus reduction in our final treated effluent at our treatment works. But the capital programme also includes that mains renewal package. It also includes investigating and repairing sewers, where there's sewer defects as well. Mains renewal, I think you would reference the burst. We tend to prioritise that based on where there has been bursts in the past. So it's not that we just pick the oldest bit and replace it, because asset health doesn't work like that. It depends on the material and the ground type. So we'll do it based on how many bursts there has been there within a set period of time. And so we will see that as the most at-risk asset. And I mentioned that within the last 5-year period, we did around 100 kilometres. We're aiming to do 1,000 within this period. So that's what I would call sort of, as well as doing the enhancement works, that's the more sort of proactive, let's go out and find those assets that are at risk and improve them. But I understand that when you have something happen like that, it might feel like, why haven't you done this already, this section? Because it's clearly something's gone wrong.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple of questions myself, and then we'll go back round. I wanted to ask about in 4.2 on your annex report, it talks about the commonly held perception of discharges from overflows increasing significantly in recent years, and that not necessarily being the case. I understand that there's better monitoring and live data in that regard, but is that really the case? Is that the reason, because we have now got better monitoring systems, or are you really suggesting this hasn't got worse in recent years, or say in the last decade? And I'll ask you a second question while you're there, and so I don't have to do it, but it's separate. It's about, it could be for the Environment Agency, but it's about the tables at 3.2 that say what has been found in the rivers through sampling programs, and I want to ask what perfluorooctane sulfonate actually is. Is that a forever chemicals? We speak about forever chemicals. Is that what we're referring to there? And what role do you play in actually investigating? What role do you play in investigating those pollutions?
I'll start on the monitoring point. That is in no way intended to say there are not a higher number of discharges than either customers or we would like. What it is doing is talking about how the data can be interpreted, I suppose. So before 2019, there was almost no what's called EDM data, event duration monitoring data on our sewer overflows, the 2,200 overflows across the county. It wasn't until the end of, I believe, 2023 that we had 100% of our overflows monitored, our combined sewer overflows monitored. And that was the same across the sector. So between 2019 and the end of 2023, you had a different percentage that was being monitored. And then I suppose it's been commented already that last year was a dry year, and therefore you'd expect there to be less discharges linked with surface water going in. 2023, from memory, was a particularly wet year, so therefore you might expect there to be more discharges because of more surface water. So when you're looking at the data in that way, you can sometimes see, I think what's commonly referred to as sawtooth type graph. And what you don't have is enough years to be able to draw a curve of the trend of whether discharges are going up or down. And that's purely just because there hasn't been monitoring in place for long enough. So I suppose what that is trying to point out is, don't necessarily jump to conclusions about where that trend is going based on 2025 to 2026 or 2023 to 2024. But you will, as we get more data, be able to see that trend. And we would hope, sincerely hope, given the amount of investment that's going in, that trend will show that the overall number of discharges is going down.
Thank you. And then the forever chemicals, PFOS.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think this is any of our expertise, is it?
It's not in our expertise. It is a forever chemical, is PFAS. I suppose that our part in with the Yorkshire Water is fairly limited, as in where we understand industrial users want to connect to our network. It's then on us to understand what the makeup of their waste is and their effluent that they want to put in, and that's one of our ways of then taking it out. But in terms of actually then understanding what the wider catchment is disposing, we can target it at a point source of a trader or an industrial customer. But then it would be on to the Environment Agency of understanding where is it from the wider environment and catchment.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go back round to those that have indicated. Councillor Rose.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a shame that with £8 billion investment, there's no money for a researcher to actually look at what the data says and make an informed decision rather than just saying, well, there's not great data. I'll ask a question for City York Council, if that's all right, about the gullies. I don't think anybody's raised that specifically yet. The report says there are 2,000 that don't work currently, which presumably means that they regularly flood every rainfall, if that's my understanding of what don't work means for a gully. We fix about 80 a year, so that's 25 years worth of repairs currently in existence, some of which presumably risk property flooding at some point. So I had a resident last night, actually, when I was knocking on doors, and they had a block drain that has flooded their cul-de-sac. It only floods the road, doesn't damage the buildings. But is my response to that to say, wait a decade or two? Is that the situation that we're in on gullies and drains, or have I misunderstood what the report says?
Can you just repeat the last bit of your question? Was that your specific?
Well, if there are 2,000 that need fixing and 80 fixed per year, am I telling residents who don't have their houses flooded that their drain is likely to take a decade or two to get seen?
So yeah, so just a bit of context. We obviously have significant number of gullies, and the resources that we have, we focus and prioritize based on risk, for example. So we ensure that though in those areas where there is reported or actual flood risk, that will be taken in as part of the assessment. So some sort of reassurance should be given to residents that we are actually prioritising, because the restriction on the ability to be able to do all of them is such that we have to focus and prioritise on those and triage them essentially based on a number of different factors, including flood risk. So yeah, obviously on occasion it principally will be reactive, but that is the nature of managing assets where we've got constrained resources. So yeah, and that's a yeah. I don't know if that answers it, but that kind of just gives you a bit of context, really.
Yeah, I think it confirms what my description was, unless anybody wants to disagree with that. I guess the other question is, we're fixing about 80 a year. Are we finding that more than 80 a year are getting damaged and broken, that the number of 2,000 is going up year on year? And that we've got a state of our water network report that doesn't talk much about the state of our water network. Is the state bad and getting worse?
I think there's a number of different utilities that work within there. I think we do give. I can't tell you that. If I'm honest, in reality, I don't know. I think we probably all know that. I'm not ascribing to utilities as such, but anyone that works within or under the road, there is always that risk that those organisations may damage pipework, or gullies. So there is a chance, yes, that it could be increasing, but I can't give you a definitive answer on that. Sorry.
No, that's fair. Happy to ask one to Yorkshire Water. So we kind of covered a bit about the sort of, maintenance is maintenance. We try and do more proactive maintenance, but just to pull out from the 2025 performance report. So I mentioned the kind of red KPIs, which was not meeting the 2025 performance commitment of 25 categories per 10,000 K, because it was double that, it was 50. which is a 72% increase on total number of pollution events. And instead of hitting 0 serious pollution incidents, it wasn't 1 or 2, it was 13 serious incidents. We are disappointed with the performance, etc. Sure. And then it talks about the largest root causes, and it says the largest root causes were asset performance, followed by maintenance strategy, prioritization, management, and then engineering reliability, which all seem like synonyms for asset quality maintenance. And then it talks about the specific actions. It says poor asset performance is our greatest cause of incidents. So we are moving from cyclical maintenance to predictive monitoring using AI algorithms and electrical signature analysis on critical motors and pumps to detect potential failures before they happen, and increasing our monitoring capability across the sewage network so we can identify potential issues earlier to prevent pollution incidents, etc. I mean, there are other bullet points there. The specific one on the front of my mind at the moment, obviously, is the Lehman Road situation. You know, I had a resident that I was talking to earlier who could taste cement or concrete in their water. Not the situation we want to be in. It is an obvious, you know, major incident that's not you know, a norm. But maintenance presumably is part of the cause of that incident. And I guess my question is, how could we be sure that any of that predictive monitoring, the algorithms, the detection, identification stuff, how can we be sure that that's going to improve the likelihood of identifying that before it happens and stopping it from happening? Because my gut feeling is, even if we're in a position where we're starting to move better, we're talking 5-10 years down the road, it's better. And in the meantime, we're going to get things like this happening every year somewhere in York or North Yorkshire.
Yeah, so in terms of purely from a pollution perspective, Councillor Rose, is so the AI modelling in effect is using a lot of the sensors out there on the sewer network and trying to machine learn the signatures of actually there's a predictive blockage in this area just due to how we're seeing the flow change or the pressure change in them systems, as just a simple example to add context. It is brand new to us. In effect, we've been using it for 3 years now, from its infancy, and it's now up to the stage where we have a dedicated team in our control room who are watching that every day, trying to pick that up, and we've now then created the processes for that then to drive our maintenance teams to pinpoint what these proactive blockages are. I think on the face of it, we are seeing very positive impact from where we are sending our teams to, and that yes, the AI modelling is very accurate on helping us find that. In terms of, that's just words from myself, in terms of then actually tracking that, I don't have them exact numbers for York on the top of my head, but in terms of our pollution incident reduction plan, it is one of our stated commitments of what we're delivering this year in that public plan. And then in next year, we'll be publishing that again, which is a regulatory requirement, but we are also stipulated to say the benefits of that. So it does touch on what we did last year in this year's publication, but next year it will show again that extra level of benefit and that maturity of where we've got to with that system in effect.
Extra benefit this year, incidents went up 71%, so I'm not sure that much benefit has been seen, but I take your point. I guess that the other point around maintenance is some of it was predictable previously, and I don't know obviously to the extent to which we haven't got the report back yet about root cause and stuff, but there's a street off Front Street that had problems with the pipe causing a sinkhole in the road and problems with water pressure, and it was resolved. And then 4 feet away, there was another incident a year or two later, and there was a third incident last November that required a chunk of wall to be demolished and a whole bunch of other work to happen. And we hope it's fixed now, but we're not sure. But that feels a bit more like it could have been anticipated. Are we going to see something, 100 meters up from Limo with the same incident again? Or how can we have that confidence in that aspect where surely we always could predict that there was a high risk there, but we didn't preventively maintain it? We're always still reacting to incidents when they happen. And frankly, residents fighting Yorkshire Water to get it fixed, even after it was the third time on the same stretch of road, and it clearly was Yorkshire Water that needed to sort it.
That is related to the Clean Water Network. There is a higher risk of a burst near where there has been a burst before because of fluctuations in pressure and other factors around disturbance of the ground, etc. So that has always been the case. So it doesn't surprise me there has been bursts near to it. What I will say is that we do now have a different approach to how we do mains renewal and repair, in that we are doing larger areas. And you'll probably see that when it comes to mains renewal in the area, is that we will go into an area and do mains renewal across the area, because we want to minimize that risk, and also because it's easier and it causes a disruption for a smaller period of time as well. So you are right, there is a higher risk around where you do a small repair that it might happen again.
I've got a few other questions, but just to specifically ask one point on there. I know you said you weren't experts on the current Salisbury Terrace situation, but what's the activity around something that's that large in terms of checking all the ins and outs and making sure that that won't happen? Because I imagine there are residents there that are slightly concerned that things might get worse again at some point.
Yeah, so I believe the works there are still going on in terms of the reinstatement, etc. So if possible, I'd like to get back to you on that directly about what our plan is going to be and how what mitigation we're taking there to try and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Rose has some sort of sixth sense, but my ward colleagues, we have just received a picture message to say that there's a water leak on Salisbury Road now, which would be about 100 metres down from where the burst on Salisbury Terrace is. I believe it's being rang in, but that could well be the same main. That's not my question that I've got in the queue, but probably worth flagging up, because that could be a bigger problem. But I just thought it was timely. Strange that. Thank you.
Councillor Vassie.
Thank you, Chair. So 2 other questions this time. Firstly, regarding riparian ownership. Residents often say to me, why aren't they working together? Last summer, Valley View in Weldrake, suddenly sewage was coming up in the middle of the road, covered people's front gardens and drives. Eventually, a lorry came and removed that and hosed things down. But it became clear that there was a blocked beck that hadn't been cleared for years of vegetation. I jumped up and down and spoke with the City Council, with Yorkshire Water, with the Drainage Board. For a couple of weeks, emails were going back and forth, and then it all faded away. Nothing resolved, no action taken. So my first question is, do you agree that the City Council and Yorkshire Water could do more to identify all riparian owners, to have it on a map, and to have clarity about who is responsible for what? And would Yorkshire Water contribute resources to working with the local authority to make that happen, in the interest of looking after your customers, just like the council is looking after its customers? Shall I ask my question in 2 parts? I'll leave that one first and then ask the second question.
So in terms of riparian ownership, so again, I think from our point of view as well as Yorkshire Water, it causes a huge amount of problems as well, as you articulated there. It causes the system to back up. That then ultimately affects us and can be a root cause of pollution and a sewage escaping. It also lowers the flow in conditions as well, which can exacerbate either a compliant discharge, or if we have unfortunately had an uncompliant discharge, again, it exacerbates that effect it has on the environment as well, if it's not free flowing. So yes, we are keen to do it. And we've got a lot of information from our side to help build that picture of the map. I'm not in a situation to say, yes, we can commit lots of resource, but I'm definitely interested in engaging with the councils to how can we build that picture, even if it is just for York right now.
Good, yeah, I'm not wanting you to make a declaration right now, but we struggle in this local authority with GIS mapping, with keeping active records of stuff, being able to track things. I would hope that you were maybe more organised on that. I would hope that Yorkshire Water would be able to work with the City Council to try and help establish this map so that we are able to respond more quickly to challenges. And my second question, Chair, if I may, relates to biodiversity and rivers as a source of life. So I sit on the local infernal drainage board, and I'm only too aware of the failure of that board over a 4-year period to adopt a biodiversity action plan. I've been banging on about it. It just comes up and it's deferred to the next meeting. The truth is there aren't the skill sets in a drainage board to produce a plan. As an example of the problem we have, the whole region is struggling with Himalayan balsam. It's a serious invasive species. Its primary mode of transport across the entire region is along our watercourses. It's impacting on biodiversity everywhere, along the Foss, the Ouse, the Derwent, you name it, along minor watercourses, on nature reserves. It threatens biodiversity. It pops up alongside water treatment plants, because I can see that in my area. It undermines and damages riverbanks. So my question there is, could CYC and the Combined Authority and Yorkshire Water be dedicating resources to work with the internal drainage boards to help adopt a common biodiversity action plan for watercourses to enable all of you to tackle the growing threats from invasive species such as Himalayan balsam? Would Yorkshire Water be willing, and this is a question you don't have to answer right now, but willing to attend a meeting with the City Council and the drainage boards to explore how the parties might prioritise agreeing a common approach to protecting the environment and having a biodiversity action plan relating to watercourses specifically?
So I think in answer to your question, I think absolutely we would be keen to sort of engage on biodiversity in improvements. As a business, we already focus heavily on invasive species and also biosecurity type activities. So it would be an extension of that. And also we've got specific investment within our 5-year plan around improving biodiversity across our assets and in the wider region. So yeah, it would definitely be something that we would want to be involved in.
Thank you, that's good to hear. And I would indicate, Chair, that I'd be more than willing to participate in any such initiative.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Very grateful for you indulging us this evening and guests, of course. I think my final question, and it relates to what's happened down the Lehman Road area, but applying it more generally, I'm wondering if, obviously there's monitoring that goes on both sides, but do Yorkshire Water know which sort of council roads and paths above its mains are in poor structural form or experiencing high demand than usual? And on the flip side, do the council know which Yorkshire Water mains might be overdue replacement or renewal? Do those conversations take place? Because it might lead to more efficient plans for renewing, replacing pipes and resurfacing roads rather than having double disruptions, if that makes sense. If the data's there on both sides.
I suppose from my own experience, there's lots of communication between the council and at operational level and Yorkshire Water, but we have shared with the council since December last year at the director and head of level meetings where we're planning on investing based on our criteria for what assets are at risk, which ones will help us to reduce bursts, etc., and help our key performance commitments around keeping water in the pipes and delivering it to people at their homes. So we've shared that information with the council so they know where we're planning to invest over the 5-year period at an indicative level, because we can't guarantee that something in 3 years is the scheme's going to be seen through, but we've shared that list with the council.
Yeah, just in response, we obviously through our regulatory framework get your requests in for immediate fixes anyway, so we have a picture of that. And then we've been having discussions sort of collectively. I mean, Mark mentioned it earlier about blue-green infrastructure, but collectively about how we work together in terms of sharing data. So hopefully this will see improvement of this. I've been back at the council just under a year. I've seen improvement in my time in the 11 months back at the council. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Mark?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick questions. I wasn't worried before, but I am now. In terms of, we had an extraordinary number of water leaks in January, at 9 in quite a small geographic area. So I'd like to know who to contact to check that you've checked that there won't be areas that need renewal. And the second question was that there were studies ongoing with sewage treatment plants to look at the bacteria within them to try and generate a carbon methane as a I think it's brown methane as a means of driving that off as a byproduct, but actually helping you to keep the watercourses cleaner. Is that still ongoing?
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting side topic from pollution, but it's actually what we call very conventional technology now, is taking so as part of our sewage treatment process, we take, ultimately, for better words, the solid matter in the sewage, and then that's what we call sludge. As part of the treatment for the sludge itself, what is the conventional treatment is to ultimately put it into a big concrete stomach, which one cleans the sludge, that makes that a clean product that can then go on land. But the byproduct of that treatment process is to create methane. We then generate electricity from that methane. So that's 100% of Yorkshire Water sludge goes through that process.
Okay. Okay, thank you, members. I think I will, for my part, maybe last little question. Really appreciate everyone's input. Do you know, I'm really surprised. The elephant that sleeps in my room in bed with me is the is the privatisation point. It's not come up at all. So I will say it because I'm a soapbox type guy, and that's what the people of Clifton put me here to do. And I'll fashion it into a question. You know, I know how capitalism works, and I'm a big proponent of nationalisation, because shareholders have not put in more money than they've taken out of the water system in Yorkshire Water since privatisation. The chief executive bonus has been alluded to as earlier this evening, and you know, 1/3 of every pound on a bill is spent on debt or dividends. £78 billion going to shareholders since privatisation. I guess, you know, the people that put me here from Clifton see the sewage coming out at the bottom of Paddy's Field. It goes right down the middle of the Ouse. I speak to the guy fishing, I speak to the people rowing down the river, and they've got rock bottom public confidence. So my question to you is, what do you do about that? And can you change the public's view on Yorkshire Water, and can you make improvements?
Okay, that's a fair question, and I'll do my best to answer it. I think that the confidence question that you raise is one that is facing the whole sector, Yorkshire Water included. It's really a challenge for the whole sector and us, and we feel that as staff, a lack of confidence from certain members of the public, and we want to rebuild that. And we know that in order to rebuild confidence and trust in us, we need to improve our performance, and that does mean stopping pollution. It means reducing discharges. It means not having bursts outside of people's homes, and we believe that will happen through the investment that's going on. The matters about how the sector is regulated, how it's owned, You may be aware that around 2 years ago, there was a commission, the Independent Water Commission, that was begun under the then new Labour government. And that took evidence about how the sector could be governed within the parameters set by the then government. And that published in July last year. That has then come through, and you know, that is an ongoing process that we are involved in as a sector, and we have our views on how investment should happen, and we believe that a privatised model does allow that investment to be delivered, but we understand that other people have other views about that. But what I would say is that reform agenda is still live, it's still ongoing. It will, I imagine, although again, as someone referenced earlier, I haven't spoken to Andy Burnham either, but I, from what everything he said about greater public control of utilities, that implies that that is still on his radar. So as a council or as individual members, you may want to put something forward about how that regulation could work. We will do the same.
I appreciate that response. Do you have a final question? I'm looking at final. Yep, and then we'll sum up.
I can tick everything else off in a sweeping set of statements and 2 questions, if that's okay. I was going to ask a very similar question, given that there was 1.6 mil revenue, 464 million pounds operating profit, 114 million pounds profit before tax, and 0.17 mil corporation tax this year. You know, that, and obviously not here to defend themselves, the CEO being explicitly banned by law from receiving a bonus, and then receiving one from offshore that presumably wasn't related to the fact that Yorkshire Water failed to meet all the legal minimums on water safety, but presumably was for their effort on loads of other things that isn't anything to do with Yorkshire Water. Otherwise, it wouldn't be lawful for them to receive that bonus, would be my take on it. But they're not here to defend themselves, neither are the regulators who broke the law and have failed to regulate Yorkshire Water. And we're not talking about the other elephant in the room, which is the failure to maintain and build reservoirs, leading to hosepipe bans that go into December, which is also astonishing. The 2 things aren't related to that I've got left that I think assuming that you don't want to answer anything on those points. You mentioned the roadworks do maintenance, lots and lots of miles of roadworks. We regularly have complaints after those roadworks. The roads aren't in good state afterwards. So what's the obligation in terms of repairing the roads to a standard, particularly including like where there's tiles that are replaced by temp tarmac? And we get loads and loads and loads of questions by residents on that. And secondly, mentioned the burst that's just been identified, but there were 2 I knew about this morning, one in Clifton, one in Acombe. They're not on the map on the website. You can't actually search the map for York ones because York's too large. So you have to search at a much smaller postcode area, which I did. But can we have more visibility of where there are currently burst pipes in York, please? Because it's really hard to ask questions about those current burst pipes if I can't see any data on it. So roadworks and burst pipes, thank you.
I think on the roadworks point and general reinstatements, because it's not always roadworks, as you said, it can be pedestrian areas as well. We have an obligation to restore them to the point that they were, the standard they were there before we went on site. So I know that there is some concern about what that reinstatement has been in this area, and there are meetings taking place about that with officers. And I think it was also a subject of a letter from Councillor Douglas, which we'll also discuss with her as well.
In what time frame after completion of the works?
Do you know? Don't know off the top of my head, sorry. But we can confirm that in writing as part of our response to several other questions. I think the burst point on the map, I'll take that away as something that you want us to look at, because we can't solve it now, and I don't know exactly how far you can zoom in on the map onto York. I did just want to make a couple of comments. The one about CEO bonus, I think it's been referred to as a bonus a couple of times. It's not a bonus, and that is the position as found by Ofwat during an investigation. It's a fixed fee that has been received for the last 2 years. Just put that on the record because it isn't a bonus, and it has, as found by Ofwat, not to be one. And then the point about reservoirs is, I suppose, reservoirs are the most visible point of water storage. They're not always the most useful ones, dependent on the geography. So in certain areas, we might abstract by boreholes, others will be abstraction from rivers direct. We do have over 100 reservoirs, mainly in the Pennines, because of the geography suits over there. But we have installed about 3 boreholes recently. We've been working on site to put them in. And then we also have something called strategic resource options, which are probably going to stretch across multiple asset management periods. And they're looking at long-term supplies of water to meet the projected water need as set out in our water resources management plan, which is a statutory document that we have to do in order to set out how we're going to meet demand within Yorkshire.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councillor Kent, I know you're indicating, just give me a moment. We've had a really long discussion, and we are asked to identify any further recommendations. We haven't actually got that many in our discussions. I've noted that the adoption of Schedule 3, I'd specifically like us to, as a committee, request a view of the council. So it's by it to the Director of Service to consider adopt what the council's view would be of adopting that Schedule 3 in conjunction with the executive member. So that, and if you could report back to us, because I'd really like, if the council does feel that that's an action it'd like to support, that we take further action on that.
That includes attenuation. And yeah, that's part of that. Yeah, so it's the ongoing maintenance issue of all of the facilities that we have been doing.
So we'll note that attenuation tanks. I've just got consideration the adoption of Schedule 3 in England, which is the sustainable drainage systems for developments over 100 metres squared. And then if we can pick up Councillor Waller's point on attenuation tanks, we would like as a committee, the council, to consider its view on that. And then I've got State of the Ouse report, Councillor Kent and Foss, of course. Would you like to come in at this point? You indicated, so please feel free to share whatever you were going to share with us. But I'd also like to ask you if you had anything specific for the committee to consider.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm aware of resources, and so I'm hoping this is partnership work that can be done. And I know there is good partnership work already in place, which I'm really grateful for. So my suggestion would be a recommendation to explore the joint partnership work on the State of the Ouse report, which uses our academic expertise in the city, Ecomix and Aquamix, and all our partners, and has an evidence base, but then also commits to partnership work on a high resolution water framework directive approach, which involves all the agencies, including the EA, the IDBs, and our charitable partners, so Rivers Trust and Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, to actually take specific action to then improve on that. So we've got the baseline, we've got the State of the Ouse, and we've got a framework directive locally, which incorporates things that Councillor Vassy suggested in terms of biodiversity action plans with IDBs and the whole river health point. That's a big piece of work. It's a big ask, but I would like us to explore that and commit to it as a council, or to explore whether we can do that in partnership with others. And then I also wanted some ask around our local plan, the upcoming refresh of the local plan, to ensure that our planning asks are maximal in this area, that all the powers we have to influence improved water quality are taken, and we ensure that we look at best practice elsewhere that does that. And then if I may, I did have a question for Yorkshire Water, if that's okay, which is our council motion asked specifically for government to mandate the EU Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. But I would like to ask Yorkshire Water to just do that voluntarily as part of your asset management plans, to have quaternary wastewater treatment in all high pollution, and I would count the York Vale of York to be an area of high pollution as part of your asset management strategy to improve water quality. I don't know if you're able to comment on that, whether that's on the horizon, but I would like to see that commitment from the industry, not just waiting for legislation.
I don't think we can give that commitment today because I need to speak with our strategic planning colleagues, particularly around what for us PR29, which is planning for AMP 2030 to 2035, what the requirements of us are looking like and how big a step that would be for us. But we can definitely respond to it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that, because we talked a bit about, I think, talked about blue-green strategy and how working with the council in certain kinds of ways. And we talked about local plan, but I'm not sure to what extent. He said, you know, how is that going to inform what Councillor Kent was just talking about, which is a local development plan refresh, which obviously is upcoming. It'd just be, I just don't know how that is going to be addressed through the process, and whether there's something there that we could recommend as well about how, you know, how it will inform that process, if you like. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions on that, whether that is something already in train or whether there is more that can be done in that respect.
I think we can recommend it, and I absolutely do think that it would then be up for officers to advise, particularly the local plan advisory group, on what items it would like to look at as part of the refresh, and members around that committee, if they'd like to take it forward and feel strongly about.
I was thinking about the working group of members actually, yeah, and I was thinking through that through, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got that as a recommendation around the local plan refresh, to look at all powers to improve water quality. That would be one for the local plan advisory group and the relevant officers. Which is Dave. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Vassy.
Thank you, Chair. So I think Councillor Kent has covered the biodiversity action plan side of it. I have sent James, the scrutiny officer, a copy of the Cambridge SUDS design and adoption guide. And I'd like to think that, I know that we haven't all been able to see it this evening, but I hope it'll be circulated, and that maybe the scrutiny committee can recommend that either the city council adopt that or produce something similar, because it's of a different quality to the document that we have. And that's not to disrespect anyone who's produced our document, but if we really want to persuade people, I think we have to have better documents for developers. And the last thing I've got here is, I don't know if you mentioned this, Chair, but producing a database of riparian ownership across York. I think that's something we could genuinely, from the discussion we've had here today, that I think all sides could work on, that would be of value to the whole city.
Yeah, could you just repeat that? The ownership across York of?
For Yorkshire Water, the drainage boards and the city council to work together to produce a database of riparian ownership across York.
Can I just ask on that? Are you talking about because you're linking it to the surface water discharge points within ditches that get blocked and then stop you from discharging your surface water? Is that right? That's what we were talking about earlier. That example in Weldrake, I think. Are you talking about management and maintenance of the riparian ditches, or are you talking about where there are outfalls of surface water?
I'm not at this stage talking about who maintains them. I'm talking first of all that there's a primary need to actually know who owns what, and what happens after that is subject to discussion. But we really need to get past this hurdle of everyone saying, "Well, I don't know who owns it."
That took 2.5 years, in Essie. No, nothing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think we could we could recommend it for consideration.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's quite it's quite a big piece of work. So I think we could recommend that that it's considered, but we could ask all members across the council if there's any specific anomalies that they are aware of that they'd like the council to investigate,
I think the problem with that, Chair, is that it's when something bad happens that you realise, oh my God, we don't know who owns this.
Okay.
And if Yorkshire Water are happy to work with the drainage boards and the City Council to create a map, I take on board your comment about resources, but I think it would serve us well in the long term.
I'm happy to second that for consideration for officers to look at, and then we'll get their view on it, on how easy or difficult that actually is. Yeah. Is that okay, members? James, are you okay with the list that's been drafted? You've got bullet points on quite a number of things. I won't read it out verbatim, I'll just skip through it. So the adoption of Schedule 3, local plan, joint partnership work on state of the ooze, leading towards a water framework directive.
If you just say the high resolution, because we have water framework directives, but this is specifically locally to York, the Vale of York, and using the FOSPA, so a high resolution water framework directive.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kent. Ownership of assets for consideration, and then the Cambridge Suds Design Guide. That's another one for consideration. So you sent it to James, the scrutiny officer.
Copy.
We'll get a copy of that over to Director of Environment and Councillor Kent, Executive Member.
And if it's not clear what you've referred to, Councillor Kent, in terms of biodiversity, I think might and understanding the river might be different to a biodiversity action plan that we spoke about. And I would like it to be considered because we did get a consensus here this evening that maybe the various bodies work to try and develop and deliver a biodiversity action plan for our watercourses. Do you consider that a different thing, Councillor Kent, or is it the same thing?
I think it's a constituent part of it, yes, but I think spelling it out is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, agreed. Okay. Councillor Hook.
Yeah, it's not so much a point, but on page 40, paragraph 8.2, it says that we're going to be told how to contact the public affairs team offline. And I think that would help on the communication, because then if we know who to ring when something's happening and we're seeing on Facebook or whatever saying what's happening to our water here in where we live, we can ring up and say what's happening then.
Yeah, that team reports into me, so I'll make sure it's shared, whether with everyone directly or through with the supplier.
That would be vital.
Thank you. That's a good point. And Councillor Rose, did you have a last one?
I don't have a recommendation, but we've got a gap in our recommendations, if you like, that we've covered kind of new developments, major incidents, rivers, but the gullies issue of that existing estate and maintenance, that just that large chunk of our water network and localized flood risk, we haven't got an action on it, and the situation is that we just repair what we can in the priority order and hope for the best. While it probably degrades year on year, I don't know what recommendation we could have, but it feels like there should be something. Obviously, the other recommendations would be around Yorkshire Water, but aside from relabeling it as a one-off lump sum offshore payment, not a bonus, there's not much I can recommend there.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Just in response to Councillor Rose. So we're updating a highways infrastructure asset management plan. So what we could have as a recommendation is to consider that when we're updating our highways infrastructure asset management plan. You'll see it anyway because it'll come through scrutiny, place scrutiny at some point. But if you make that recommendation, then we can explicitly look at it when we do that.
Yeah, if we could have how is it going to be handled in the future in that plan, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I feel your pain about that, but I think what Dave Atkinson's just responded with is good. So we'll take that at the right moment. Okay. All right. I think we've exhausted this one, so we should let people get back to where they're going. Look, but I really do appreciate your time and the work that you're putting in. I know, I appreciate you coming to this meeting as well, and for the report. It's very welcome. So we will move to our next item, and you can excuse yourselves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
members, I don't think there's much left, and I hope you won't lop my head off after this meeting for missing your teas. It's definitely tea. We'll continue. Agenda item 7 is the work plan. And so it's a draft work plan, which you'll find at page 75. James, do you want to have your moment on this one?
Thanks, Chair. It's not a drastically different work plan to the one that was in the last agenda pack. I think there's a couple of things, including some of the things mentioned tonight around Make It York, that we've been looking into. And I think the intention is to have the Chair and the Vice Chair to have a catch up with relevant officers, directors and executive members to work through timings for some of those other items that are currently listed as unallocated. So I think we're hoping to get that kind of scheduled pretty promptly, and then hopefully then that can, you know, by the time you next see this work plan report, it should be in a fuller shape.
Yeah. Any points from members on it? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Just go back to the first substantive item today is just to make sure that we have officers available to stay for the course of the agenda item. I felt there's probably more that we could have talked about in the MDZ, not American, MDZ item, and I think, you know, it would have been helpful if Gary could have been here for a bit longer. So I think we need to make sure that officers are available for the items.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else? Happy to proceed on the work plan. The highway asset management, infrastructure asset management plan is on there. So we will follow that one up, Councillor Rose, with the director. Okay, Councillor Vassy.
Can I suggest that we tend to, it just goes on and on and on, but we tend to just consider reports produced by officers for our own satisfaction in our own place and never really look over the walls. One of the things on the horizon at the moment is the likely arrival of a tourism tax. I, for one, would think it would be helpful if members had a briefing from outside, from a couple of people, on what other places are doing to maximise use from tourism tax, rather than us just having our tiny little bubble and trying to make it up. So could I ask that somewhere in the forward plan for the coming year, we explore what best practice is emerging across the country and maybe beyond, but probably in our country because the laws are more related to ourselves.
Is it on that point, Councillor Rose?
Yeah, just to note, there's a scrutiny member briefings page and it's blank across the board with one postponed item. So
yeah.
I think that feels like a scrutiny member briefing that makes sense, and it looks like there's space in the diary for it.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it forward that way, or in public committee. I'd prefer public committee on that item if possible. So I think it's an either or, but I definitely would like to deal with it in public. We've got a really good, they are called Good Organisation. If you're not aware of them, they sent everybody a copy of their work on tourist tax from a resident's perspective. It's a really good report. They actually, in my view, and I'm sure in other people's views, they're nationally leading on this, and they're based here in York. A really good organisation. So both we could look to bring in outside people, including them, or other local authorities have done work, advanced work on this. And we can't forget the combined authority on that as well. So
of course,
yeah, happy to add it and actually work at some pace on that one, because I do have personal interest as well to see it done good justice at this
Yeah.
stage of policy making.
Thanks, Chair, because it seems it's increasingly clear that for a local authority like York that struggles with funding but has millions of tourists, this is potentially a key part of how we thrive going forwards.
Yeah.
And all better understanding the subject, I think, would be good.
Okay, perfect. Members, I think that's everything. Really appreciate your time and I hope you all have a good evening. There's no any other business, no urgent business, so meeting is closed. Thank you.